Evening. Welcome to the October 8th edition of the Downers Grove Village Council meeting. We've got a lot of visitors tonight. That's great to see. If you're here in council chambers, there are copies of the agenda on either side of the room, those shelves on the sides. If you want to get a copy, you can follow along, see where we are in the meeting. For those watching at home, if you go to our website, downers.us, the lower left-hand corner, this week's meetings is a link that will take you to the same information. Welcome. Let's all rise and start this meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
April, would you please call the roll?
Commissioner Gray.
Here.
Commissioner Colabany.
Here.
Commissioner Sadowski-Biggett.
Here.
Commissioner Wallace.
Here.
Commissioner Earl.
Here.
Commissioner Jose.
Here.
Mayor Barnett.
Here. Thank you. We are all in attendance tonight. That's great. One note about the way the meetings go. If you're here for public comments, there are a couple of opportunities for those. Before we get started on the actual agenda, there will be an opportunity for anyone that's here to speak on a subject not on tonight's agenda. And then as we hit each agenda item, there will be additional opportunities. So please make use of that if you see fit. And we'll continue on here with minutes of previous council meetings.
Mayor Barnett, I move that the council adopt the minutes of the October 1st, 2019 meeting as presented.
Second.
Are there any comments on those minutes? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you, that's unanimous. We have a couple of proclamations this evening. These are always fun. We'll start here with National Pharmacist Month. You might have seen some folks here in white coats. Welcome, guys. I'm glad you're here. Whereas pharmacy is one of the oldest of the health professions concerned with the health and well-being of all people, and whereas pharmacists are specifically educated with a focus and level of expertise on medication therapy that exceeds that of all other healthcare providers, and are ideally suited to work collaboratively with other healthcare providers and patients to improve medication use and outcomes by providing services through medication therapy management. And whereas the Midwestern University of Chicago College of Pharmacy graduates approximately 200 qualified pharmacists yearly who go on to enter the healthcare system to practice patient-centered care. And whereas the American Pharmacists Association and the Illinois Pharmacists Association have declared October as American Pharmacist Month, now therefore I, Robert T. Barnett, Mayor of the Village of Downers Grove, do hereby proclaim October 2019 as American Pharmacist Month in the Village of Downers Grove, and urge all of our citizens to acknowledge the valuable services of pharmacists to provide safe, affordable, and beneficial pharmaceutical care services and products to all citizens. Dated this 8th day of October 2019 at Downers Grove, Illinois. We have with us tonight some folks from the Midwestern School of Pharmacy, and I'd like to ask you guys to come up and accept this proclamation.
Good evening. Mayor Barnett, commissioners, and residents of Downers Grove. On behalf of the American Pharmacists Association Academy of Student Pharmacists at Midwestern University Chicago College of Pharmacy, I thank you for proclaiming October as American Pharmacist Month in the Village of Downers Grove. This proclamation brings visibility to the pharmacists of the community. Pharmacists are the most accessible healthcare providers, providing health screenings, immunizations, and medication therapy management, along with many other services. As medication experts, pharmacists reduce the number of patients who require hospitalization, provide optimal therapy recommendations for those who are hospitalized, and decrease the number of medication-related errors. Pharmacists improve patient outcomes. Our association cares deeply about the health and safety of the community and enjoys giving back to the village of Downers Grove. With recent health news regarding the topic of e-cigarette usage, I am happy to share with you that we have developed a new program called EduVape, our smoking and vaping or e-cigarette education program. We developed the program in the summer of 2019. This initiative will inform attendees about the misconceptions promoted by social media and raise awareness regarding the health hazards that these products obtain. This program starts with education of the students, faculty, and preceptors at Midwestern University with hopes of expanding to educate surrounding schools. In addition to this project, Midwestern University also has a Nalox Now program that continues to educate more than 800 attendees about substance abuse as well as overdose. This program also trains individuals on how to administer naloxone, better known as Narcan, an opioid overdose reversal medication. This initiative was developed in the summer of 2016 and is now recognized as a drug overdose prevention program by the Illinois Department of Health Services. Our association chose to focus on the program of opioid overdose in light of the current opioid epidemic in both the Chicagoland area as well as across the United States. As student pharmacists, we felt that it was our responsibility to provide education and medications that can help combat this problem. This program started off as an initiative that would train all of the students and faculty at Midwestern University. However, our association has begun to expand by providing training services at schools and hospitals in the surrounding areas. Thank you again for proclaiming October as American Pharmacist Month, and have a great evening.
Thank you. But wait, there's more. No, go ahead, guys. For those that don't know, Midwestern University is one of the gems that makes Downers Grove as awesome as it is. Check it out if you're ever online or looking around. This is also Fire Prevention Week. Whereas the Downers Grove Fire Department sponsors an annual fire preventive program, and whereas the Downers Grove Fire Department primary concern and interest is the protection and safety for life and property in the village of Downers Grove, and whereas the Downers Grove Fire Department renders a vital public safety and prevention service in the village of Downers Grove, and whereas the observance of Fire Prevention Week provides an excellent opportunity for individuals to check for fire hazards and test smoke detectors in their own home and businesses. Now therefore I, Robert T. Barnett, Mayor of the Village of Downers Grove, do hereby proclaim the week of October 6th through 12th, 2019 to be Fire Prevention Week in the Village of Downers Grove, dated this 8th day of October 2019, Downers Grove, Illinois. I'll ask Chief Pendelski to come up and take this proclamation. I think you've got a crew with you.
Good evening. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council, for this opportunity to speak this evening and for recognizing Fire Prevention Week 2019. Last year, over 1.3 million fires were reported in our country. These fires resulted in 3,400 civilian deaths and over $10.6 billion lost. Every 24 seconds, a fire department somewhere in our country responds to a working fire. Every 36 minutes, someone sustains an injury due to fire. And a life is claimed every 2 hours and 34 minutes due to fire. Many measures, which are often very simple, can be taken to reduce these losses significantly. Our great community is not exempt from this. During Fire Prevention Week, we resolve to protect ourselves, our families, and our community from fire. This week presents opportunities for businesses and families to learn about ways to protect themselves in case of fire, and most important, to help raise awareness of the steps we all can take to prevent fires. We use this week to encourage all citizens to install and maintain smoke alarms, as well as sprinkler systems where applicable. Change smoke alarm batteries on a routine basis. Develop and practice a fire escape plan that includes at least 2 ways out of every room, and to follow safe practices in our everyday lives. As we mark Fire Prevention Week by recommitting to awareness and preparedness, we also extend our thoughts to all those who have been affected by fires. Their sacrifice will never be forgotten, and in their memory, let us rededicate ourselves to preventing tragedy before it strikes. The fire department will be participating in 2 special events this week that I would like to invite all to attend. Tomorrow, Wednesday, October 9th, is our annual Night at the Firehouse, taking place from 6:30 to 8:30 at Fire Station 105 at 6701 Main Street. This is an opportunity to attend safety demonstrations, learn more about your fire department, and have a chance to meet our great firefighters. Friday, October 11th, will mark the 25th Annual Fire Department Silent Parade. This parade is dedicated to firefighters and civilians who have lost their lives due to fires. The parade will start at 7 p.m. in Hinsdale and will pass through Downers Grove on Maple Avenue at approximately 7:15. We look forward to seeing everyone at these events. Thank you again for this opportunity this evening.
For those that haven't had an opportunity to witness a silent parade or attend Night at the Firehouse, I'd encourage you to do so. There's a couple of obvious benefits of the learning and resolving ourselves to do some of those simple things the Chief talked about. It's also another sense of just learning more about your community and getting a little more attached to it. Make a point of coming out to Maple Avenue on Friday night and stopping by the Firehouse Wednesday. All right, that takes us on to item 5 on the agenda, which is the mayor's report. April, you have a resolution?
Yes. A resolution appointing Andrea Knudsen as chair to the Community Events Commission. Whereas Mayor Barnett has made the following appointment to the Community Events Commission, now therefore be it resolved that the Village Council of the Village of Downers Grove does hereby confirm the following appointment. Community Events Commission appoint Andrea Knudsen as chair to a 3-year term expiring August 31, 2022.
Thank you, April. Is there a motion for it?
Mayor, I move that the council adopt the resolution as presented.
Second. Thank you. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you all. Thank you, Andrea. We have another item on the mayor's report tonight that does not appear on the agenda. I've taken the liberty of asking Michael Casa, our Economic Development Corporation president, to present his quarterly report.
Thank you, Mayor Barnett, Village Commissioners, Michael Casa, and President and CEO of the Downers Grove Economic Development Corporation. And I'm here to present our quarterly report. First item I want to talk about is village sales taxes. The most recent month reported was June of this year. Over the same period a year ago, for the month we were down 1.4%, and on the home rule tax, we were off by 5.3%. So much of sales tax that are collected are a function of national consumer spending. The first 6 months of 2019, nationally, retail spending was down, especially tough in the first quarter. However, hopefully going to see an uptick. July was the best month in 2019, and August was the second best month. Nationally, July retail spending was up 5.6%, and August was 4.1. We'll see if that translates into some better numbers. On the hotel taxes, in August of 2019, which is the most recent reporting month, was up 2.59% over the same period a year ago. I want to just go over, update you on some projects. I'll start with Cooper's Hawk. Cooper's Hawk is open for business. They had their grand opening about 10 days ago. It was spectacular, and encourage everyone, if you haven't been to the facility, to go have a look. It's really going to add a lot to our community. And there you see a photo of Mayor Barnett helping to cut the ribbon at their grand opening. I had mentioned to my contact at Cooper's Hawk a year ago that I'd like to be the first Downers Grove person to buy a wine club membership, and they had it waiting for me when I arrived. I actually had forgotten about it. But it's a great facility. In addition to the restaurant and winery, they of course moved their corporate headquarters to Downers Grove and in the Esplanade Office Park. And then also they just signed a lease a few months ago to open their largest distribution center at Bridgepoint on Finley in Downers Grove. So they're truly embracing our community. Value City Furniture opened in the former H.H. Gregg location on Butterfield Road in Finley Square. And right next to them, we will soon see the opening of Golf Galaxy. Golf Galaxy is sort of taking a new lease on life. The company was bought by Dick's Sporting Goods, and this is going to sort of become their golf equipment arm. Starbucks is currently redeveloping their existing site over on Ogden Avenue in the center that includes Aldi and Hobby Lobby. This new Starbucks, which will be on an end cap, will have a drive-through, which their current one does not, and we are working with the shopping center owners to backfill the Starbucks, the old Starbucks location. 6301 Main is the southeast corner of Main and 63rd, and Vequity, which has done 2 projects on Ogden, is redeveloping that corner. It will include a new 7-Eleven. Ziegler, what you're seeing on the screen is the completed second dealership for Ziegler Automotive in Downers Grove. The original one is still on Ogden. This is down the road at Ogden and Cross. It's going to principally be the home for Ram trucks, but also for overflow inventory from their other location. Foxtail. Foxtail is the new restaurant that's being developed by the people that own Caden's Kitchen in our downtown. And Foxtail, which is going to be opening in the early part of 2020, is going to locate in the ground floor of the Maple and Main apartment building on the corner of Maple and Main. So look for Foxtail. Bridgepoint, I mentioned earlier, which they have signed several leases for their facilities that they're building on Finley. They have acquired an additional piece of property just south of Phase 1. They're calling this Phase 2. It's another 13 acres, and they're going to be before the Plan Commission in November for approval. They are currently negotiating with a very large company that may take 1 or 2 of those buildings. Green Bay Packaging, which is on the northwest corner of Warrenville Road and Finley, is nearly completed. There's a rendering of the building. Aero Gear. I mentioned Aero Gear. They're the largest employer in Ellsworth Business Park, longtime Downers Grove company, a gear and defense contractor. They were purchased by their top competitor out of New York, Precision Gear. And so this will now be Aero Gear, a division of Precision Gear. The company, the new ownership is putting a lot of money into the facility, planning an expansion. We had a chance to meet the new CEO, and it's going to be a great thing for another company in the Ellsworth Business Park. And the last project I wanted to mention is NTI Connect. They have purchased the building at 5101 Thatcher in Ellsworth. They're a major fiber optics company, and they're relocating their corporate headquarters and their main facility to Downers Grove. At the last presentation I gave, I talked about our strategic plan. Today I want to identify some of the data points that we're going to be tracking on a regular basis. In fact, we'll have a lot of this data in place at the time of our next presentation. This is not a complete list, but this is some of the data points we're going to be tracking. You probably cannot read that. So municipal and home rule revenues will be tracked monthly. The Illinois internet sales tax revenue will be tracked whenever it's paid. They'll be starting it hopefully in the summer of 2020, whether it's paid quarterly or monthly. However it's paid, we'll track it. The village's food and beverage tax revenues, which are reported monthly. Sales tax revenues by retail segments, which are reported quarterly. National consumer spending data, that'll be reported monthly. National consumer spending by retail segment, that will be reported either annually or quarterly, depending on when those numbers come out. And national consumer spending, bricks and mortar versus internet sales, that'll be reported annually. Hotel tax revenues reported monthly, and the industrial sector occupancy rates and the office sector occupancy rates will be reported quarterly. Those timeframes represent when that data becomes available. Let me mention a couple of marketing events. The first one was our annual event for commercial brokers and developers. It was held on October 2nd, just last week. We had an incredible turnout. It was our largest event ever. Alter Brewing hosted us. Capri, one of our premier restaurants in our downtown, was the catering firm that provided the food. We had over 60 commercial brokers and developers from the Chicago area reserved to be at this event, which was our biggest turnout. And we're going to be sending a letter out to each one that attended from the mayor, thanking them for being there. And as Commissioner Earl noted that night, she could hear deals being made that night. Deals were being brewed that night. So thanks again to Alter, to Capri, and also a special thanks to the council members that were able to be there. So thank you. And the last event I wanted to mention, this is an annual trade show that we do. It's called the International Council of Shopping Centers Deal-Making Show. This is the show in the Chicago area, actually the Midwest United States, where retailers, commercial brokers, developers, and corporate real estate managers gather. And we've had a booth at this show for, I think, at least 7 years, and it's pretty cost effective. It's rather inexpensive to have a booth, but once you give up your booth, you don't get it back for a long time. So we still have our space, our end cap space, and we will be there next week, Wednesday and Thursday, promoting Downers Grove. I promised several people that I would be brief tonight, and I was, which for me is always a difficult thing to do, but I'll be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Michael. Anybody have any questions for Michael?
Yeah, a quick question. Michael, thanks again for all the work that you do.
Thank you.
Being able to see Alter Brewing for the first time. When you mentioned the retail spending being down, is that kind of a combination of our shift towards more continued shift towards the web purchasing, as well as just the industry downturn that we're seeing as well, or?
It's a very good question. I think one of the reasons the first 6 months were down nationally was because of what happened in December and January. Those were terrible months for sales tax revenue in the village. They were terrible months for retailers nationwide. December was really hurt when Toys R Us closed all their stores nationwide. And that they were a big part of the national economy for consumer spending in December. Why they would close prior to Christmas, I don't understand, but they did. And then January in the Midwest United States, I think the principal reason was the polar vortex that hit, and people simply were staying home. They were not going out. So February was a little better, then March was a little better, and so forth. But for the first half of the year, overall consumer spending was down. Now, to answer your question regarding the internet, there's no doubt that internet spending via the internet and other smart devices is way up, and spending in bricks and mortar stores is down. We'll see if there's a change to the local retail sales since the national sales picked up in July and in August. We won't know until the numbers come out. Long term, there's no question that people using the internet and smart devices like their phones has an impact on overall sales. Now, of course, The state has tried to remedy that by passing legislation to create an internet tax that is made available, the revenues portion anyway, at the local level. But again, that hasn't happened yet. It's hard to predict what kind of revenue that's going to generate.
Great. Thank you, Michael.
Sure.
I have a follow-up question to that. Actually, so does the internet tax that will kick back now also cover, like, when you buy something on an app and pick it up? Is that the same as also
Yes,
purchasing
what
online?
the internet tax covers is what's called a remote retailer.
Okay.
And the easiest way to define that is if you're buying something on the internet and the place that it was shipped from is not in Illinois, shipped from a warehouse in Kansas, then the state will collect an internet tax, and there's a formula where a portion of it is then shared with municipalities and counties. The state still keeps the lion's share.
Sure.
There are two types of remote retailers. One is Amazon. You buy it from Amazon, you pay Amazon, they ship it to you. The other one's called a marketplace retailer. So if you ever gone on Amazon and you notice that they are hosting, in effect, a third party. So Amazon will say, we don't sell it, but click here, this other vendor sells it. And Amazon will collect the money and they will take care of the shipping, but it's someone else's, in effect, the seller. That's called a marketplace seller. And they are going to be subject to the same conditions as a remote retailer. That if the product is shipped from outside the state, then it is subject to the state's internet tax. The only time that tax does not kick in is when you are buying something on the internet from a business in Illinois and it's shipped from Illinois.
That was my
So if you go to your website and you buy something from my favorite toy store in downtown Downers Grove and they ship it to you, there's no internet tax collected and shared with the municipalities.
So that would be true, like if you purchased something from, say, I don't know, a Kohl's, and you did store pickup, and it was already in store.
So if I could jump
Yeah,
in
please.
here. There are a variety of sales taxes and sales tax rates based on a variety of input factors, including point of delivery, point of purchase, where the good is stored, whether it's in-state, out-of-state, whether it's in your village or not in your village. It's like a permutation of a variety of different tax rates. So what we have asked the Illinois Retail Merchants Association to fill out for us a chart that describes every sort of transaction you can think of, what the tax rate is, where that money goes, how much goes to the state, how much is distributed to the village, et cetera. For a straightforward concept, there's at least 10 or 12 different things to fill out, and it can get pretty complicated pretty quickly. The good news is the Retail Merchants Association has agreed to fill that out, and we'll be looking forward to see that table in the coming weeks.
Thanks.
And the other piece of good news was that it's not just the municipal tax, it's the home rule tax that will be subject to this. The money is collected in different ways, but this is the state's response to the Supreme Court decision, Wayfair versus South Dakota, that permitted all the states to now collect sales tax from companies that are not shipping it from that state. You know, it's very confusing, I understand.
Any other questions? Thank you, Michael.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry, Marge?
No, that's okay.
Sure.
I just wanted to ask what the typical lag time is between when the quarter finishes and when we get the numbers.
I wish Lisa, our Director of Marketing, were here to answer that. Like, the reason we get the hotel tax numbers so quickly is because it's the village that's computing them. We are waiting any day now for the July numbers on sales tax. Probably will happen this week. So they're running, 3 or 4 months behind. The quarterly numbers are far worse. We have the second quarter. We do not have the third quarter yet. Those we get those later on. I wish we could get the information quicker, but it's just not made available.
Understand. Thank you, Michael.
90 days, but the state has just launched a web-based portal that is supposed to be able to get us the numbers as they're entered, which is a 30-day lag time, and municipalities can log on anytime to get it.
Oh, fantastic.
Thank you.
Thank you. This takes us to the first opportunity for public comments tonight. This is an opportunity for folks to ask questions of the council or give us information or opinions on subjects which are not on tonight's agenda. We've had, as probably many of you know, a challenging week of emails and various other inputs, so I've got a couple of questions. Bear with me, I'm making a point. Who in this room has a mother? Raise your hand. And who in this room would say they care about the community they live in? Okay, so here's the thing. We already found two pieces of commonality. I know there's some aggravated folks, and there's some dissension amongst the council as well. But at the end of the day, we're trying real hard to do the best we can for our village, and I'm certain that every person sitting up here is doing that, and we have a lot of commonalities. So even though we're going to go through the evening and have some subjects on which we don't agree, please keep in mind that disagreement doesn't mean people don't care or are somehow disconnected from the community. All right, and with that, so if anybody has any subjects not on tonight's agenda.
Hi, Mary Blanchard. I wanted to let the community know that in recognition of National Coming Out Day, Downers Grove's largest private sector employer, Advocate Good Samaritan Hospital, is hosting an event this Friday, October 11th, from 12 to 1:30 in the Red Oak Room of their cafeteria. This is the first ever event of this kind at Good Sam. The goal is to make it clear that Advocate Good Sam is a safe, affirming, and supportive environment of the LGBT community, for the entire community, and for Good Sam employees. The LGBTQ ombudsman at Good Sam hopes that this provides resources for friends, family, and allies. Everyone is welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. Please.
Mike Wally, I live in Downers Grove. Came here for the other thing, but while the Economic Development Commission was talking, I just wanted to promote again, and I know I sent emails to pretty much everybody on the board, the 75th Street area. I don't know if he talked about it before, I came in a couple minutes late, and then I guess the Ogden corridor also, and hoping that will be a continued focus for the village board.
Thank you. Any other comments on items not on tonight's agenda? Okay, we'll continue on with the consent agenda.
Mayor Barnett, I move that the council adopt the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
Any comments on the consent agenda? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carries unanimously. Thank you for that. Moves us on to our active agenda. The first item on tonight's active agenda considers a refinance opportunity. Is there a motion?
Mayor Barnett, I move that the council adopt an ordinance providing for the issuance of not to exceed $22,575,000 taxable general obligation refunding bonds in one or more series of the Village of Downers Grove, DuPage County, Illinois, and providing, and providing for the levy and collection of a direct annual tax for the payment of the principal and of interest on said bonds as presented.
Second.
Any council comments or questions about this item? Mark?
Yeah, there's a lot of people here this week that weren't here last week, and just so you know, this is kind of like refinancing your mortgage, and it stands to save us about $800,000, I believe, over the term of these bonds. So thanks to the finance staff and village staff for everything they keep bringing for us.
Thank you for that. Anybody from the audience have a question or a comment about this item? Okay, April, would you call the roll? Oh, I'm sorry. Could you come up to the microphone and ask the question so we can all hear?
Is this finance for the residential or the multifamily is also included? Multifamily, like apartment building also?
This is debt the village has issued over the past for a variety of subjects, and we're refinancing it at essentially a lower rate.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Anyone else? Okay, April, would you call the roll?
Commissioner Jose?
Aye.
Commissioner Earl?
Aye.
Commissioner Gray?
Aye.
Commissioner Colby?
Aye.
Commissioner Rodriguez?
Aye.
Commissioner Wallace?
Aye.
Mayor Barnett?
Aye. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Okay, the next item on our agenda tonight, I want to mention to everybody, so again, we have a lot more folks here than normal, and I think it's good to understand process a little bit. When an item is on our active agenda, like that refinance was, as Commissioner Earl indicated earlier, we had talked about that previously and discussed it, so there were more details that had been provided in the past. when we reach an active agenda item, there's a couple things that you can be certain of. One is that a bunch of work has been done, and secondly, that likely there are opinions that have been formed up here. The intent of tonight on an active agenda item, any active agenda item, is to actually take a vote. So it's important to understand that the council is likely ready to vote on each of these items that are on an active agenda. You'll see later a first reading. First readings are typically what we kind of consider to be a workshop, and so at that point, we're still trying to figure out what the subject is. We should keep in mind that it's probably not good government, irrespective of the subject matter, if at this stage of the process, a public policy question, whether it's refinancing debt or trying to decide what to do with cannabis or a potential economic development situation, if that we are sitting here tonight having gone through a bunch of information and deciding that somehow based on either counting emails or the most people that come to the podium on one side of an issue or those that speak the loudest or those that fill the room. It's probably not great governance. So please keep in mind that your input is welcome. We're not going to stop anybody from speaking. Everybody should feel free to have that opportunity. Just understand where we are in the process. And then, as we always remind everyone, when we get to the opportunity for public comment, please do keep it to 5 minutes. And remember that if something is said once, 5 times, or 15 times, this group is hearing it. We're taking a record of it, and we're hearing it. And so it's not necessarily necessary to repeat everything. You're certainly welcome to speak. I don't want to stop anybody. I'm just reminding everyone of the process and where we are in it. So with that, is there a motion for an ordinance regarding cannabis business establishments?
Mayor Barnett, I move to adopt an ordinance prohibiting adult-use cannabis business establishments as presented.
Second.
Is there any council comment or questions on this issue? Greg?
Mayor Barnett, thank you. Certain of the council colleagues that it seems are in favor of this particular motion and this ordinance have indicated that they do not see this vote as an opt-out forever, but instead as a wait-and-see. Therefore, I move to amend the proposed ordinance to add a sunset clause, repealing the ordinance as of January 1st, 2021, unless extended by affirmative vote of the village council.
Second.
Okay, we have an amendment to discuss. It's now on the table. Any comments or questions, or anybody want to address the amendment further? Everybody understands the amendment that's been made? Dave, you were about to jump in.
I just wanted, could you repeat the proposed amendment, Commissioner Rosen?
Yeah, to add a sunset clause repealing the ordinance as of January the 1st, 2021, unless extended by affirmative vote of the village council.
April, you got that?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, I'll remind people from the audience that maybe haven't seen this before. We've occasionally done this on things in the past, such as taxes, certain development opportunities. We occasionally do that. We compel ourselves to come back and revisit an item. The most recent one I can think of was probably our gas tax. So with that, are there any comments or questions from the audience on, we're talking about the amendment now, the idea of putting a sunset clause in. Please come to the microphone if you'd like to speak on it.
Hello, my name is Catherine Malloy. I have a question. Does that mean that whatever you decide on tonight then will be revisited in, what was it, January 2021? Is that correct?
It would be an expiration of the decision made tonight, so it would have to be revisited then, yes.
Okay. So whatever the
Whatever
vote
be
is
decided tonight, correct.
Okay, that's what I want. Thank you.
Any other audience questions or comments on the amendment? Any other council questions, comments on the amendment? Right? Oh, sure.
Sorry. So, any drug use is affected by three main factors: the perception of harm, the availability of the drug, and social acceptance of use of the drug. My question is, what are we doing? I don't want our youth, or any of us, to have to be continually contemplating whether this negative activity is something that they want to do or not. I want them to be able to contemplate positive thoughts, such as how much God loves them. Then they'll learn to love themselves, their families, their community, their country, and most importantly, their God. Please let's help our youth and all of us to live positive lives. Thank you.
Thank you. Before we go on any further, I'd like to ask everybody to avoid that, if we can. Here's the thing. We know there's two versions of what the right answer tonight is, and so it doesn't make a lot of sense, and frankly, it just delays the meeting. If every time you hear somebody that agrees with what yours in your mind, you decide to applaud, and then we go back and forth. So let's just keep that to ourselves. We know there's going to be both comments given to us from the podium, and we know that there's people that support both versions of what ought to happen. Let's just leave the applause behind. Please.
Hi, my name is Susan Wan, and I am in support of the amendment actually being proposed tonight. I was actually surprised that there's a motion for the prohibition, given that we had initially thought that the council was going to set forth for more on the Planning Commission to do more studies, not just on the sale of it, but also on the growth and the regulation regarding it, the whole business within the village. So I am in support of it and hope that you will do that too. Secondarily, I did write to the council, but I only heard from 3 people in response, and for those that passed and in support of going to this prohibition, I never heard from any of you regarding why you felt the way you did, and I would still like to hear from you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Sean. Before my comments, I tell you the great news. Lyle and Wheaton last night choose opt-out. So my name is Sean Hu. I have been the owner of 450 Rogers for 15 years. Tonight, I'm here to ask all of you to opt out recreational marijuana sale in Downers Grove. As you know, Downers Grove is the best known as the safe, family, and business-friendly community. It is one of the best towns in the state whose residents are committed to common-sense conservative policies. We all invest our futures in Downers Grove because of these unique characters. I'm quite confident that those who are here, all of us, for the long haul tonight, want to protect our hometown and keep it that way. As Dr. Wiener mentioned in his speech on September 17 at Lyle, he said with a THC concentration in certain GMO strains as high as 30%, cannabis is addictive. It is a dangerous life destructor with over 500 chemical compounds. As a landlord, I have a lot of stories about the destructive consequence of many tenants addicted to marijuana. Due to time limit, I would like just mention 2 of the sad stories. The first one, Mr. P was very smart handyman. He managed multiple properties before he moved into my apartment. Then he was fired from this position, because of his out-of-control marijuana addiction. He could not concentrate on his job and could not control his temps once he's high on marijuana. He parted with the drug, had an affair with the drug, and eventually divorced on a high. The most tragic part is that he hanged himself a few months later after he moved out because he can no longer afford his marijuana addiction and rent. leaving behind 2 lovely children in elementary school. The second, I'm sure some police officers know who I'm talking about. The second, right now I'm evicting a genius futures trader who moved into my apartment 3 years ago. He once made millions of dollars a year before he became addicted to marijuana. It was marijuana that ruined his life. He lost his job, his family, his $1 million house. Now he's behind on rent for 5 months. He even has difficulty finding a job at a car dealership because he could not pass the drug screen test. It only gets worse. His son has been disabled from car accident because he's too addicted to marijuana. So tonight, I'm here strongly urging you, Mr. Mayor, and all commissioners, to protect our village, our children, our residents, our families, our property in Downers Grove by using your power opt-out marijuana sale with your vision and wisdom. Thank you. God bless you.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Ricky Wang, and thank you so much for having me here. Those who support recreational marijuana sale believe that the city can increase revenue by collecting sales tax. It is a myth or truth. These are some lessons we can learn from our neighbor of North, Canada, where marijuana has been legalized for almost 1 year. In the fourth quarter of 2018, which was right after marijuana legalization, the total marijuana sale in Canada is $5.9 billion. The currency I'm using is Canadian dollar, and so is for the rest of my speech. $5.9 billion. The black market accounts for $4.7 billion, nearly 80%. Even the CEO of Canadian leading marijuana company admitted that, quote, the black market business has never been better. Those state-run stores in Ontario lost $42 million during the last fiscal year, even though they had monopoly for the first 6 months and permanent control over the online transaction. So people ask why. The reason is very simple. The legal retail price just could not compete with the black market. Legal retailers must have physical stores. Black market retailers use street corners. Legal stores hire salaried employees. Most of those black market sellers are consuming themselves. The price in legal store is more than $10 per gram, while it is less than 6 grams on the black market. Anyone who had economics 101 in college, you would understand that people always choose a product that is cheaper. That's why we see more Toyota than Mercedes on the street. That's why more people go to Walmart than Whole Foods. It is naive to believe marijuana users would choose differently and abide the law. And sometimes we even break the law without any significant economic benefit. We just do that for fun. Let's be honest to ourselves. How many people sitting here still tax and drive? Therefore, it is highly unrealistic to believe marijuana sale will bring significant revenue to our city. But we know for sure we will pay the cost of all kinds of negative effects. Increased crime rate, increased traffic accidents, increased therapy cost, decreased working efficiency. I'd like to end my speech with 2 moral stories my parents told me when I was a kid. First, it is stupid to paint a cake to satisfy your hunger. And second, more importantly, it's suicidal to quench your thirst with pouring water. Thank you.
Thank you.
By the way, for all the facts I said, it's from a very reliable news source. I print all the webpage here, or you can just Google Canadian legal marijuana store losing money. You can find more news like that.
Before we go any further on comments, I want to remind everybody that what we're seeking commentary on right now is the amendment, not the main motion itself. So if your comment or question has to do with this idea of a sunset clause, please go ahead and jump in. If it's a general comment about the subject of cannabis, please hold that until we return back to the base motion. Go ahead.
My name's Diane Kasnick, and I think that the sunset clause is a really good idea. I'd rather not have to use it. I'd rather not have this this passed to begin with, but I think if you're going to pass it, the sunset rule is the way to go.
Thank you.
Hi, I don't have any personal, hi, I'm Zach Alexander. I don't have any personal stories about marijuana murdering anyone I know, but I am actually from the town, unlike a lot of the opt-out people, and I'd like to speak to the actual amendment that if the council people are legit about saying that this is a wait and see, even though we should be looking into the actual research and we should be gathering information from the town, but if you really mean that this is meant to find out information, then the sunset clause seems like a no-brainer and hypocritical to vote against it, really. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Fran Bixler, and I'll be honest, I don't live in Downers Grove. But the sunset clause gives you 12 months to decide what to do. In every other state that has legalized marijuana through the ballot process, they've had an average of at least 16 to 17 months. So if you're going to do an opt-out sunset clause, I encourage you to do something along the lines of 18 months. A year really isn't enough time. You want to see how the other states are handling their situations, and some of them are not handling it too well. And you really need to have that time to research those communities that are most like Downers Grove to determine what you want to do. So if you do a sunset clause, I ask you to amend it to at least 18 months. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Kelly Sampton. I have some questions on the sunset clause. First of all, when will the sales tax be reported? Because if we're going to look at this in 12 months to determine, the pros and cons, I'm assuming we're also going to want to look at the return on investment. So any town that's legalized it now for the sale, they should have done detailed analysis with the revenue and the expenses to have a return on investment. And after 12 months, to review that and go back and determine what their actual return on investment was. Now that's if they can capture all the expenses. When is the revenue going to be reported?
I don't think we actually know that. One of the things we did was sort of stop getting into the details. And so in terms of the revenue, I think my gut sense is it's probably going to be the second quarter next year before people start to get a real sense of what that looks like, if by then, because there's a growing process to any market. But I don't think we really know the exact answer on when we would start to see consistent, repeatable sales tax numbers.
Okay, well, I hope they have done detailed analysis on the expenses that we're going to incur.
We've limited ourselves.
Well, I worked in capital planning, and we had to have a 20% return on investment.
Right.
And we always did it. There wasn't. But if the revenue's going to be that behind, we might want to consider waiting more than 12 months on this clause.
Yeah.
That's all.
Thank you. Please.
Two quick points. Mr. Mayor, can you clarify a process question for me regarding public comment?
Can try.
From the website makes it very clear that anyone standing at the podium must identify themselves by name and indicate their address and whether or not they're a Downers Grove resident. Am I mistaken on that?
No, you're correct that that's what the website says, but we need to fix that. The state has made clear that we really aren't supposed to be asking addresses. People are welcome to come to this meeting, whether they're from Downers Grove or from outside Downers Grove, and their input needs to be taken by all of us.
Okay.
Toward that end, could we have your name, please?
Well, I'm Andrew Peloso, and I'm a Downers Grove resident. I give that information freely. The second comment is just that I support the amendment as proposed.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Wayne Cerny. I was born in Downers Grove, raised lifetime resident with a few breaks living overseas where marijuana was legalized in certain areas. So I'm kind of a little bit agnostic or logical about this topic, but I do have a question about the sunset clause. With regards to the sunset clause, will it require revisiting and a vote, or will it sunset and just go away?
I think as proposed, it would cause the ordinance itself to be void, which would require some action on our part then.
The intent is that, if I might, as the proposer, the intent is that it would go away unless reauthorized by the council.
Right, so if the council chooses not to restate the ordinance with the sunset clause or no sunset clause, those politicians don't really have to take a stand, and then we can make it legal, right?
That's correct.
Yeah,
Okay,
I'm going to get over my skis and ask Enza to bail me out when I say the wrong thing here. But if a community doesn't have some ordinances in place, then it's, for lack of a, not exactly a legal term, but a bit of a free-for-all. And so it is entirely unlikely that any community would choose to not act at all. So the knowing impending invalidation or lack of reauthorization would certainly compel, I'm certain, this council or any other council to make some kind of action. Actions at that point, I assume, could be to simply reauthorize what's been going to happen tonight or reopen the whole conversation, but doing nothing is not really a good choice for any municipality.
Okay. It just seems like a little bit backdoor getting it approved over a short period of time. And that just sort of bothers me. Thanks.
Enza, did you want to jump in, or Dave?
Yeah. Staff strongly recommends that any proposed amendment to this ordinance be further amended to include the clause to direct staff to prepare zoning regulations regarding cannabis businesses to be in place prior to the sunsetting of the prohibition. It is imperative that we avoid a situation where there's no prohibition and no zoning rules. So, since we just heard this just now, we're working feverishly to try to figure out how to make sure we protect the integrity of our zoning ordinance and to make sure the rules for doing business in the village are clear. So, we would propose and strongly recommend, add to this amendment, this concept of directing staff to prepare zoning regulations regarding cannabis business to be in place prior to any sunsetting of prohibition.
Rich, a question? Dave, could you explain what would happen if we weren't covered by a zoning ordinance?
We would have a high degree of uncertainty of what is or is not permitted in our zoning ordinance, and it would be up to interpretation of staff and highly likely the court system as to what would happen if somebody proposed selling cannabis when it is not specifically addressed by district or use or regulations, et cetera.
Thank you.
Sir, please.
Mayor?
Yeah, go ahead, 1 second.
I have no problem with further amending that. I think it's pretty well understood that we would not continue to just move forward and not have another conversation on it. That was never my intent. So, of course, there would be discussions about zoning, about additional rules. Perhaps it's an extension on the ban, but thank you.
Please.
Mayor Bennett and the commissioners.
Are you on the amendment? Speaking to the amendment?
I'm speaking on the opt-out.
Hold that, please. We'll come back to you. Don't go far.
Good evening. My name is Paul Worster. I am a Downers Grove resident. I do not support the amendment as it currently stands. I'll save my comments about the yes or no opt-out for later. However, we've had a long time knowing this was coming to research it, and I think it's short-sighted and naive to bury our heads in the sand without having allowed the staff to do adequate research. The reality is that cannabis is all around us. Our kids have easier access to it than us, and I think researching this to see what the implications to Downers Grove would be, what makes sense, what doesn't make sense, not doing that work is a failure of good government. Thank you.
Thank you. Please.
I am a resident in Downers Grove for 32 years. And I have an issue with the amendment, and then I think that not enough time. And I check all your, you list all the resources that for reference, and no mention state of California. The state of California passed the, legalization of marijuana in 2017. And then, but, the two most prominent city that has recreational marijuana is San Francisco and Oakland. And many, many towns in the northern part of California opt out. So, those that you can check, the good town, Los Altos, Palo Alto, Sunnyvale, San Mateo, Burlingame.
So you would support the amendment?
Huh?
You would support the amendment or not support the
I
amendment?
think we need longer time.
Okay.
And also, I think you list the JAMA, the pediatrics, the marijuana use on teens, and I think if you check CDC's the comment, I raised my daughter here. We went through the DARE program, and and then now we are going to do this, to fight, what we believe, have benefit for. And my daughter is a, board certified cardiologist, and she brought the, attention to us, the marijuana use on teens and the children is, you cannot measure that. So can you imagine that we are going to go to the downtown, every day Sunday, and then right next door, the daddy and mommy will get a pop? Think about it. Please think up for our children.
We will.
Thank you.
Guys, the amendment, speak to just the amendment, please, so we can sort of keep the meeting moving. I want to give everybody a chance to speak, but still make progress tonight, so please.
My name is Bo Martin. I live in Downers Grove. I think the amendment should be scrapped because it's very poorly phrased. It seems like it opens up the possibility that recreational sales of marijuana would be legalized within almost a year. It's difficult to understand why an amendment would be phrased and have to be interpreted in terms of intent by a council member. And to me, frankly, it sounds very sneaky.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Sue. I live in Downers Grove. I know I've spoken to you before, and I speak in support of the amendment. I think we need to take a moment, and I agree with it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Greg Zane. I'm a Lyle resident, by the way. So last night,
Welcome to town. Welcome to Downers Grove.
Thank you. Last night, Lyle decided to opt out without any amendment, anything like that. So I would ask you to scrap the sunset amendment as well.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Rick Kay. I live in Downers Grove, and I am in support of the amendment. I will address other things later.
Okay, thank you.
Mary Blanchard, I would also support this amendment.
Peter Laganowski, I'd also support the amendment.
Thank you.
My name is Frances Breed. I've been a resident of Downers Grove for over 32 years, and I believe that we should not adopt this amendment.
Thank you. Okay. I think we got a little sense, right, of the amendment? Second round on the amendment? Yeah, okay. Let's keep moving.
So my name is Catherine Malloy. I'm a resident of Downers Grove. I don't understand the sunset rule. What confuses me is, are you saying that after a year, you're just going to possibly just drop it, and if you drop it, then it will automatically be zoning for cannabis in Downers Grove? I don't understand what the amendment is saying.
No, what the amendment is saying is that the current ordinance would need to be reauthorized. It would stop being in effect as of the date that, I don't know, whatever the date was that Greg said. What you heard from staff was that we were going to, at least in theory, if Greg allows it as the maker of the motion, add in that staff would have to be prepared with another ordinance prior to the actual sunset date. What we're not going to do in this, whether this amendment passes or not, the reason we're here tonight having this conversation is we're not going to leave Downers Grove in a position of not having an ordinance in place that speaks to the issue of cannabis.
But it sounded like they were saying that they were going to have it prepared for zoning for cannabis.
Right.
So it sounds to me like you're trying to get a year to get everything in order to pass it.
I think I will let Greg speak in a moment, but I suspect, because I've been party to all the conversations and emails as well, what we've heard from, we had a period of time where we were headed a different direction, and much of what we've heard since we changed direction was that we needed time to observe the effects of legalized retail sales in other communities around us that were going to go ahead and legalize it. Darien is the most notable close one. And so what I suspect Greg is doing here is trying to reflect that. We have obviously a split Rome, right? And we have a split constituency as well. And so it seems as though the majority of the council is selecting to move in a direction that would ban cannabis sales, but it also seems as though most of the conversations to this point have suggested that the big reason for that is because we want other people to experience whatever the detriments are, and we'd like to learn from and observe those before we take that on for our residents. So I think it's trying to reflect that.
Okay, well, I oppose the amendment because I don't, first of all, I don't think in a year's time that you can see all of the detriment from it. I think that's going to take more than a year, maybe a few years. So I oppose this amendment.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor, if I could add to your thoughts there?
Please. Yeah, they're your thoughts.
You captured them pretty well. The idea behind the amendment was to keep it simple. Going back and revisiting the issue, whether we pick it up right here or we pick it up with a larger discussion of allowing one type of cannabis business but not another in, say, this time next year, I think is in our DNA. We wouldn't simply let the ordinance disappear and do nothing as a result. This council wouldn't stand for it, the staff wouldn't stand for it. The idea was to add something simple that requires us to continue this conversation in approximately a year. There's nothing sneaky about it. There's nothing underhanded about it. It's about, my colleagues have talked about wait and see. They've talked about hitting a pause button. So if they're being honest about that, let's hit a pause button. Now, if you want to do 18 months, you want to do 20 months, hey, amend it. An amendment can be amended, and we can vote on that. I've got no problem with that. And we can add in the language that staff talked about. I have zero problem with that either. The point is that if we're really talking about a pause button, then let's pass a pause button.
Yana Kerchak.
Please.
Can you hear me? Yana
Yep, go ahead.
Kerchak. I'm a 25-year resident of Illinois, and I'm 100% opposed to the amendment because I'm opposed to the legalization of marijuana. I think the statistics are out there. We've had states that have already gone through this, and it's basically just a money issue, number one. Number two, who's going to decide, like, was it a revenue thing? It's not a mental health thing. It's not the health of our society, the safety of our society. It's just a money thing, and who's going to decide that? Not too long ago, Pam Zeckman did a report saying the state of Illinois labels murders as suicides because the number of murders are too high. So who is the one who's going to be deciding all these numbers? Because we already know who pushed this to be in the forefront in the first place.
Before we go any farther, guys, the amendment, first of all, let's remember what the amendment does. The amendment does not legalize retail sale of marijuana at its date. It compels this body to revisit the issue. So just there seems to be some kind of fading into the conversation that says, I don't like the idea of legalizing, therefore I don't like the amendment. The amendment is a compulsion of this body to revisit the issue at a certain date. That's it.
Just clarification, Mayor. The amendment, as staff understands it, would not require to relook at it. It would be an automatic sunset, right? I just want to make sure we understand the amendment.
Yeah, you're right. Thanks for getting that exactly right. To my point earlier, this council, any other council, is not going to leave us in a situation where we don't have an ordinance on an issue. So, but thank you, Dave. Okay, next to the microphone, please.
My name is Hao Wang. I have been a resident in Downers Grove for more than 32 years, and I also raised my family here. My comment for this is, as far as the CDC announcement, they have not come to any conclusion in terms of the vaping. There's over 1,000 vaping-related illness, and they have not found out exactly what's the reason. So it seems to me, in the national level, even the national federal government hasn't, and also in addition, smoking marijuana at the federal level is still illegal. So if you hold a federal job, and if you smoke marijuana, you will be losing your job. And in addition, if CDC cannot decide what is the real cause for more than 1,000 vaping-related illness and also more than 18 deaths, and we, yes, so basically, I just want to say I oppose the use of cannabis.
Okay. Guys, please. I know everybody wants to speak and wants to say their point. I think we kind of know what those points are. We'd like... It would be... Okay, hold on, guys. Time out. We're going to try and continue this meeting in two ways. One, super friendly to each other, because we're all here trying to do the right thing that we think is the right thing, even though we know that we disagree, right? First thing. Second thing is we're going to do it in a way that has some order to it, so that we can proceed through the evening and accomplish something. What would be ridiculous for everybody in this room and everybody sitting up here and everybody that lives in the village of Downers Grove would be to spend 3 or 4 hours tonight and get to the point where we had to just gavel the meeting shut because we were all tired and out of gas. So let's not do that, okay? Let's do those two things. Let's be thoughtful of each other, friendly to each other, smile and nod. Sometimes that's the best answer. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Steve Gozdecki, Downers Grove resident, and I support the amendment, especially insofar as I don't have any notes with me or anything. I'm just free-versing, but I seem to recall a lot of discussion running up to this vote tonight about, well, let's let other towns lead the way and we can consider it later. And it certainly sounds like that's not on the table minus the amendment, so I support the amendment. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Chen Liao. I live in Downers Grove North High, the school district. So I'm a resident of Westbound, but I think if my kids go to Downers Grove North High in the future, I have a right to speak here.
Always. Welcome.
Yeah, so I oppose the amendment because I think my standing will not change. It's not a matter of a few years. I know that, I choose to opt out, and I would not change. And I don't think research can prove or not prove, because I'm a researcher. I know data can be deceiving. So I hold a strong opinion that opt-out is the right choice, and I will be the same in a few years. So I think spend time on amendment is not very wise.
Okay.
So
Thank
I
you.
oppose.
Thank you.
Good evening. Jim Watson, Downers Grove resident. Question on the amendment. Given the fact that we will be delaying our decision until 1/1/21 as proposed here, how does that impact the ability to get a state license at that point in time, given that this is the first round? Would there be future rounds that we would then be available for at that time?
So the state licenses are issued to individuals or corporations, not municipalities. And so when we're not really delaying our decision, we would be deciding if the motion, or initial motion plus the amendment were to go forward, we would be deciding tonight to opt out of retail cannabis sales in Downers Grove, cannabis-based businesses in Downers Grove, and then we would be looking at it again down the road. In that interim, I'm only surmising, but if you were receiving a license from the state of Illinois, you'd probably not be thinking Downers Grove is your first choice, given you don't have the opportunity to operate here.
Absolutely, and given the limited number of licenses and the most likely that they will be taken and used in other cities at that point, is simply adding this amendment, kicking the can down the road and basically opting us out at this point?
We would be opting out.
But opting out for the long haul.
So there is uncertainty all over this thing. And one of the things that's uncertain is there are a series of license issuances. And the criteria by which those will be issued and who will receive those licenses is less than clear. And so I think I can only say what I said before. If you got a license, you probably wouldn't be thinking about Downers Grove, but that doesn't mean that this would automatically preclude us from something in the future. We don't really know who's going to get licenses and decide why to move where.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor Barnett, Commissioners, my name is Lisa John. I'm a resident of Downers Grove. As far as the amendment goes, what we've heard from previous cities is either an opt-in or an opt-out. Over here, when we have the amendment, one of the requests that I have is if you can clarify what does the sunset clause mean for the residents in Downers Grove. I'm a parent who has kids, and I oppose the sale of recreational marijuana in Downers Grove. What does this mean in the interim period when we're delaying the decision? We still see stores that are selling CBD. Will they be only for recreational uses? What does it mean for families living here? If you can clarify that, that would be helpful. When time comes, I will talk about why my stance as well. Thank you.
What it means, if the two motions that are sitting before us tonight, the original motion plus the amendment were to go forward, it means that for that interim period, THC-based, cannabis-based businesses would not be legal in the village of Downers Grove in that interim period. What would happen is at that end of that interim period, that decision made tonight would be vacated, what's the right choice of words, repealed, and we would have to decide to do something, either do it again or make a different choice or another sunset clause. You could do any number of things at that point, but in that interim period, to your point, the original motion would be to prohibit any cannabis-based activities in the village of Downers Grove.
And would one of you be briefly able to state why an interim instead of opting in or opting out?
Touch on that?
For the reasons I stated earlier. My colleagues who are in favor of opting out have said that they prefer, in one commissioner's words, a pause button. Others said wait and see, because they wanted to see what happened in other towns that are authorizing the retail sale of cannabis products or allowing the manufacture or distribution or transportation, rather, types of businesses. If that's really the case, if this isn't no forever, if this isn't completely a no, if this really is wait and see, if it's a pause button, then let's have a pause button. Let's look at what other towns do, what their experiences are. We may all come back and say, we like the decision to opt out. We might not. But if what we're really interested in is a pause button, that's what this is.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Sean again. I think we should learn from the Lyle. Lyle is our small, neighbor. Wheaton is, the next to Lyle. So, I oppose this amendment. So I'm not sure why it seems like I know what your real purpose. You try to delay and trick the people, or you try to, if you work for the, the people, really the real value, you try to quickly opt out. So that's why I oppose you in the sunset.
Okay, thank you.
Good evening. Jennifer Huda. I'm a resident of Downers Grove. My thoughts were expressed last week at the meeting, but I just wanted to say today that I do support the amendment because there are many residents that have been asking for the council to do more research, which they have initially opted not to do. So if this is the way that we need to accomplish this research, then maybe this is somewhat of a fair compromise. So I support it.
Thank you.
Hi, Mike Gawali, again, a resident from Downers Grove. More a question for them over there. If we put the sunset clause in place for the state of Illinois for it to become legal for sales in Downers Grove, we would have to have a vote by the village board to opt in, correct? It wouldn't, or no?
Well,
that's the staff concern.
Remember the free-for-all question or comment that I made earlier?
Right.
That's and I think to Rich's point, I think that's kind of what he was getting at down there. If we pass this, let's just do a what if, right? Because sometimes it's easier to describe that. If we would pass both of these motions tonight, and then we would do nothing, the village council would take no action. At the date described in the amendment, there would be no Village of Downers Grove commentary or ordinance on the subject of cannabis sales, which would turn it into a free-for-all.
Okay. And the second thing is, I keep on hearing the same question from a lot of people here. Why are we talking about revisiting this in 14 months ballpark from today? I've seen responses from Commissioner Culvaney saying, we need more time, we need to see what the other towns can do. Regarding Darien opting in, the data, I gotta imagine, with it being recreational marijuana, is gonna be out there and out in front, and they're gonna say how much money they've made. So as far as not getting the data on a timely basis, with something as high profile as recreational marijuana, I gotta believe it's there. And then that gives the village board time to say, hey, is this worth it for us to have it, or is this not what we wanna go down? So I would support the amendment.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Vicky Yang, and I do not support the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you.
Eileen Briner, Downers Grove. I would like the amendment amended to a longer time. We need more than 14 months. We just had a report on retail sales, and some of those come in very slowly. We may not have enough information by January 2021 to revisit this. If we're going to have a pause, then make it a pause for at least 2 years, 2022, if you're going to pause it.
Could I ask a clarifying question?
Absolutely.
So in our presentation, it says available licenses for recreational cannabis businesses by 7/1/2020. For the municipalities that have opted in, the first question is, when will those licenses be administered by the state? When would they first be available?
The first round has already been released.
Okay. And so I don't understand what we're talking about by July 1st, what's the significance of July 1st, 2020 date?
There are a series of anticipated distributions of licenses. Some have already been. That's, I think, the next distribution is expected July 1st.
Okay.
Please.
Hello. My name is Susan. I'm living in Downers Grove for over 18 years. I don't support the amendment. Why we delay to make a decision? We should opt out.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Ed Brainer. I'm a resident of Downers Grove. I oppose the amendment. I think marijuana is not good, in particular what it will do to our youth. We heard from the pharmacist today a litany of things that are a problem today, from opioids, etc. Marijuana is the first step to that. 12 months from now, 24 months from now, marijuana will still be bad. I oppose the amendment.
Thank you.
Hello, Ann Gall, Downers Grove resident. I am in favor of the referendum tonight. I have one question because I'm not familiar with the process. Is there any way it would ever go to referendum and let the people of Downers Grove and not just people that are here?
Generally speaking, there are two ways something goes to referendum. The village can put things on the referendum, or residents can choose to put things on referendum. So is there any way it could? There's at least two vehicles for that to happen.
I'm Debbie Anderson Phillips. I'm a resident of Downers Grove, and I support the amendment. And I'd also like to say that some of the information that I think that I've heard commissioners want to get is not just retail sales, but indications of increased or decreased crime, who's using cannabis retail stores, are children having access to it in any way. It seems to me that those kind of statistics will be available much sooner than retail sales kind of statistics, and that a year is, or 14 months is plenty of time for for you to get those kind of statistics, which, in my opinion, are probably even more important to look at than the retail sales. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Li Wang. I'm a property owner of Downers Grove. I'm not a live here. Just before the meeting, I visited my tenants. We vote against the amendment.
Okay. Thank you.
My name is David Fu, work at Downers Grove, 3134 Wood Creek. So I'm opposed amendment.
Thank you.
My name is Christine Martin. I am a resident of Downers Grove, and I oppose the amendment. I think it's been thrown in, and it's thrown the night off a little. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Christina Karpowitz. I live on 4530 Forest. The amendment did catch me off guard, so my question is there some way we can put in the amendment, like certain guidelines as far as research need to be done? Because I know this marijuana thing was posed months ago, and up until last week, council members have said they haven't had information. So I don't want to revisit the issue in 2021 and have more of the same, we don't have the information. So that would be my amendment to the amendment. Maybe put something in there that there's more strict guidelines as far as research and development and studies. I mean, 11 states have legalized marijuana. There's got to be revenue statistics somewhere that nobody's been provided to council. And my other question, which ties into it, is there a re-election of the board members between now and 2021?
No.
No.
I don't think so.
Okay. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Jen Wang, and I live in Downers Grove, and I'm a Chinese teacher. And for my students, the children around us, and for our next generation, I strongly urge you to opt out. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Karen Crow, a Downers Grove resident for 20-something years. Two things. Is there going to be a committee that actually is put in charge of doing all this research? And so that's my first question.
We haven't.
But that should actually be a part of it, right? I mean, we can't say we're coming up, Christmas time and the meeting is next month and we have to pull together all of our information.
I'm going to get ahead of Greg again, just because I think I know where this is headed, and what the point is that most of the commentary that we heard from within this body about should we opt in, should we opt out, let's choose to opt out, much of that was backed up by the idea that we wanted to see what our neighbors experienced, see what kinds of things Darien experiences, see what kinds of revenue Darien actually gets, see what kinds of revenue the state gets. Remember, the state is going to collect the tax on this and distribute it to every municipality, whether they're in or out, in certain amounts.
I get all that. I'm
So
really
it's
ignorant
not-
about the process. And
So
so
it's-
is there somebody here, like
So that kind
a
of
health person?
that kind of information is flowing all the time. That's
Okay.
not the kind of thing that
Well,
you
then
can
I
set
would
aside
amend
a
the
group to
amendment to
research.
say we need a committee with pharmacists and police officers and first responders, business people, really hit all of the points we're concerned about to gather that information. That's my first question. The second one is, again, very ignorant about political process. If we wanted a referendum, if we wanted the people to vote on it, could we get that together between now and 21?
Don't know the answer to that. I would think so, because that seems far enough away to me that my gut says yes, but there's very clear rules about that available online through the state.
Online?
Through the state, yeah.
Okay.
Maybe the county. I don't know if it's the county or the state that has that, but
Does anybody know?
probably it's pretty far away.
Your research
Probably
would be
so.
faster than mine. Does anybody know?
There's definitely enough time.
Yeah, check the count. It would start at the county. They're going to have, because the election commission is probably going to be sort of the driving force behind that.
Okay, thank you.
Good evening. Steve Karpowitz. I'm a 52-year resident of Downers Grove, and I support the amendment. And I urge all of you in this next year to research when you're doing your research, look into why cannabis, marijuana is illegal at the federal level. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Jimmy Wang, and I'm a resident of Downers Grove, 11 years. I don't know why the decision is so hard. This marijuana, this recreation drug, is not good for kids, not good for everyone. Yeah, okay. I urge you just to make decision opt out.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'm not seeing anybody get up, which is a good sign. Up. You headed for the mic? Okay. I don't want to cut anybody off.
Janet Winningham, I'm a Downers Grove resident, and I support the amendment, and I would suggest, just in process-wise, that you not amend to establish committees or research committees. I take it that the body here can establish their process to get to achieve the informational results that you want without putting it in an ordinance. So I support the amendment.
Thank you. Everybody sit down. Awesome. Okay. We're going to continue the conversation here. Are there any additional comments from the council or questions the council has of staff on this subject? Or Greg, please.
Thank you, Mayor. If my colleagues will permit me, I'd like to add staff's recommended language with regard to directing staff to prepare zoning regulations regarding cannabis businesses to be in place prior to the sunsetting of the prohibition. The idea being that we have options on the table to look at zoning, which is one of the things we were considering, or re-extending the opt-out should the council choose to go in that direction.
Does that require a second? Okay.
Second.
So then,
I'll
all right.
agree to amend.
Okay, all right. Anyone else have anything they want to add?
I have some questions.
Okay, please, go ahead, Rich.
In the process, when a business approaches community development for a new business in one of the zoned areas, and then they have to go before Plan Commission and before Village Council, what's a typical average period of time in months would it take a business to go through that entire process before they be given the permit to be able to locate a business here?
It's about 8 weeks from the time we receive a completed application. That'd be in the short end. Sometimes it's a little longer than that. So from the time we receive a completed application, there's quite a bit of prep time to get that application in place.
And then that would only enable it to go before Plan Commission in the next available meeting?
I want to make sure I understand the question. The question is, what is the time frame from the time of application to the time it reaches the council or the time it reaches the Plan Commission?
Both. And then there's a follow-on question, how long does it take to actually typically open the business?
Yeah, so it's probably more like 10 weeks by the time we receive a completed application to the time it makes it to the Village Council. We had a recent amendment to our process that requires the Plan Commission to approve an official set of minutes at their next meeting before the item comes to here. So it's more like 10, 12 sometimes.
And then like these various things, like for instance, there was a clinic that opened on 75th Street. Do you have some idea how long after they've won the approval did it take them to actually do the build-out and open the business?
It's really up to the petitioner's time frame and how much work they want to do in advance of receiving zoning approval. You have some petitioners that assume there'll be an approval and they prepare building permits, applications, drawings, et cetera, line up contractors, have them already. In that case, it's a short time frame. There are some that don't proceed to drawing up building permit sets of plans and applying for building permits until after the zoning is in place.
Okay. Like Starbucks on Ogden Avenue hasn't opened yet, has it? The new one?
No, sir.
So that was before Plan Commission, how many months ago? So several months. So it could be 9 months? Is that fair? Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Any other questions or comments?
I just want to point out that this is literally just a year pause button. And so we could go back in a year and say, we feel like we don't have enough information, let's give it another year. So that year sunset clause does not mean that we can't do anything after that. If we feel that we don't have enough time, we can certainly do that again. So I just really want to emphasize the fact that this is the pause button. This is the moment to reevaluate it in a year to see where we want to go. So.
Cool.
Sure. I just wanted to make sure that I address this issue, as I am the commissioner who mentioned a pause button. And I think the motion made by Commissioner Jose tonight, it's certainly come as a shock to me. It seems as if it's come as a shock to staff. I appreciate everyone who has spoken about the amendment so far this evening. I have a few concerns. One is that it seems like there's confusion around the sunset clause in general from several people in this room, up here, on the side, in the audience. And while I am not opposed to revisiting this issue, I am at this moment in time hesitant to put an exact date on revisiting it. As we all know, we have a lot of large issues coming up in the village. We don't know at what point those will roll out. And so at this point in time, I'm feeling uncomfortable putting an exact date on it. People mentioned data. I want to make sure that that is available. We don't know if it will be at that time. There are a lot of unknowns. So I still am holding to my pause button, if you will, but I don't necessarily feel comfortable at this time, given the way that this has been presented, and setting a firm date when we have, as a village, a lot of other issues that are going to come our way that we already know we will be facing. Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions? Enza, logistically.
I do.
Oh,
Yeah, I asked
sorry.
questions before. I didn't make my comment. It strikes me that if it took 9 months to get a business open, it would take a certain number of months for that business to get rolled out. I don't think it's by the wildest stretch of imagination that in their first 3 months of operation they would have any reasonable numbers that would give us that kind of experience in these other villages. So we're looking at a year before these other villages start clicking these numbers out. That only gives us 2 months of data. My concern with seeing what worked and didn't work was based on a lot of factors, like location. What was before us originally was kind of zoning these things out of existence to put them in places like Ellsworth or where Flavor Chem, I can't remember the name of that particular industrial development, to put it in a place where it was pretty much out of sight, out of mind. I don't feel comfortable with that's the proper thing to do to a business. I thought the role of government was try to invite businesses here and then help them to be successful in doing that. I would really like to be able to go talk to the mayor of Darien and their various council members to say, what would you have done differently? Would you have not put it on 75th Street? Would you put it in an industrial park? And then also, we don't get to choose typically, or often we don't get to choose the businesses that come before us. Once they come before us, and they come before us with a petition, as long as they meet the requirements and they go before the Plan Commission, we really can't turn them down because we don't like them. We also would need to see what kind of players are in effect and in business that you'd want to welcome to Downers Grove. One thing that economic development can do is when we specifically decide we want to go after a business is they actually start contacting those businesses. We can't guarantee that the dispensaries that will show up in other towns will be wonderful, great actors with wonderful storefronts that open up in a great way and stay that way for length of time. We would hope that they would be of good character and care enough about Downers Grove, but who's familiar with Meadowbrook Shopping Center at 63rd and Belmont? That shopping center has been in disrepair for years. It's an eyesore. People are always telling us, what are you going to do about it? Well, the owner of that shopping center happens to be the owner, and their primary business is a legal medical marijuana business. So if you ask me, would you want to welcome that business back into Downers Grove? I drive by Meadowbrook all the time because I live near that neighborhood. I'm saying, no, I would not want to reach out to that particular individual. So I think the also being hamstruck, we have a lot of issues. We're going to be discussing them perhaps tonight, perhaps in the future, about our long-range plan. We have to figure out what we're going to do about facilities. We have to figure out what we're going to do about our stormwater plan. We have to figure out what we're going to do about our ERP program. We have to figure out what we're going to do with the Human Services Commission. We have to figure out if we're going to give action items out to the Environmental Concerns Commission. So there are a number of things on our plate, and I wouldn't feel comfortable if we were locked in by this particular time, where we may only have weeks or a few months to see what other businesses have done to make our decision. We can always revisit this. A lot of people have argued this is going to be just like alcohol, and I guarantee you, I'm not sure anyone in the room remembers the first establishment that got a license to sell alcohol in Downers Grove. And my point there, it doesn't really matter, because if it becomes mainstream, they're going to be everywhere. So, yeah, I'm not in favor of this particular amendment.
All right, Greg?
Thank you, Mayor. Gosh, it's hard to know where to start. First off, medical marijuana dispensaries will receive the first licenses. They will be open, and we can derive data from them. So we don't have to wait 6 months, 9 months, a number of weeks before the end of the sunset. Furthermore, we could amend the sunset. You don't think 12 months is enough? Make it 18. Make it 24. Pick one. Pick a pause button if you're really serious about it. You talk about zoning it out of existence. I'm sorry, but what we're doing now would be removing it from existence. And if what you really are interested in is putting it on 75th Street or Ogden Avenue or Butterfield or 63rd, then let's talk about that. But that's the first I've heard anybody really say that they thought that the zoning was too restrictive, and thus we ought to look at something different.
Well, maybe we should be putting it on Main Street.
I'm sorry, I have the floor.
Time out, guys.
Sorry.
We asked our audience to think of each other. Let's do the same thing here, okay? One at a time. Greg, continue.
Thank you, Mayor. And with regard to Meadowbrook, none of the zoning options that we looked at had Meadowbrook on the map of permissible locations for a cannabis-based business. So I'm open to ideas here. If you really want a pause button, then let's have one. If you really want to wait and see, then let's wait and see. Let's revisit it. Let's look at the data. But let's put it on an agenda to make sure that we actually do revisit it rather than have it get lost. Thank you, Mayor.
Enz, I have a question. Logistically speaking, or process-wise, we could reauthorize with a normal sort of 1 week, 2 week process to sort of to Leslie's point. If we got to be 10 months from now and said, you know what, we haven't even touched this yet, and we don't have any information from our neighbors, we could just put a first and second reading together, reauthorize, and then roll another 12 months, right? I mean, procedurally, there was no compelling process ahead of that that's required. Yeah.
It would just be like any other amendment to an ordinance. First reading and then a final.
Yeah, okay. So it seems to me, you know, my timing-wise, I don't want to get hung up in timing. My gut tells me 18 months makes a lot more sense than 12, just because all my colleagues may remember me talking about the revenue on the early end of our conversations. I think that's going to be a challenge for anybody to get up and rolling. But this sounds like, to me, just sort of a commitment from this group. It's really less about whether we open it up down the road or don't open it up down the road, or whether we allow people in Meadowbrook or any place else. But rather, it's just a question of, are we committed to revisiting this thing and being forced by our own actions to do so, or are we committed to just saying so now in hopes that somebody will bring it up again? I think that's sort of the more fundamental question. Unless I'm missing something. I mean, we're not going to have exactly the information we want ever. We didn't have exactly the information on September 3rd. We don't have exactly the information tonight, and we're certainly not going to have exactly the information we want 12 months from now. But I thought I heard, I had contacted everybody individually, and I thought I heard, with the exception of Marge, it was crystal clear. I thought I heard everybody else say that they had an interest in revisiting the subject. And so what I hear Greg suggesting is let's codify that. Marge?
I will just say that I moved to opt out. That's what I believe we should do. I have no doubt that at some point this will be revisited again and again, possibly, and again, until somebody comes up with something that they like better. But I don't feel the need to put a time limit on it, and that's where I'm at. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else want to, guys, anybody else want to jump in from the council here?
Yeah, real quick.
Sure.
Since I've come on the commission, one of the things I've heard and that I've heard discussed amongst us is this idea of not kicking a can down the road. And I've heard it enough times where it feels like what we're talking about is in essence doing that. We are taking something that we are looking to actively move forward on today and really looking to try and stretch it out in a way that feels exactly like the thing that we said that we are opposed to doing. And so I could be wrong in what I'm hearing. I am opposed to this, to what you're proposing, Greg. I just think that it's time to kind of make a decision and move forward.
Thank you. Greg?
Just real quick, nobody's talking about kicking a can. Nobody's talking about delaying a decision. If the amendment passes and the ordinance passes following it, Downers Grove will have opted out. We will just simply talk about it again in a year. Thanks.
All right. Don't make me do this. I hate this. Is embarrassing. Don't make me do this. All right. Look, guys, the why you're listening to, maybe it doesn't register with you. Maybe you disagree with the why, but you've heard a lot of examples of why, okay? Do not just shout to the council on any subject. We're trying to have a meeting that has some order to it. If nothing else, so that the folks watching at home can follow what's going on, and April can get some quality minutes pulled together. But we're also supposed to be working at this stuff together, so please, let's not do that again, okay? Are there any more council questions on the amendment or comments on the amendment?
I just have a quick question
Please.
for staff. So if we choose to not vote for this amendment, is there anything restricting us in the future from bringing this topic up again? No. Okay, thank you.
With that, any other questions? April, would you call a roll on the amendment?
On the amendment, Commissioner Jose?
Aye.
Commissioner Sadowski-Fugit?
Aye.
Commissioner Gray?
Nay?
Commissioner Cullivaney?
Nay.
Commissioner Wallace?
Nay.
Commissioner Earl?
Nay.
Mayor Barnett?
Aye. That motion fails, 3-4, which brings us back to the original motion. Would you, April, could you read that one more time just to make sure we are all back to square one?
The original motion. A motion to adopt an ordinance prohibiting adult-use cannabis business establishments.
Thank you. We will take additional comment now. I'm going to remind everybody, first of all, no clapping and no shouting out, okay? Secondly, we've heard a lot. Despite the plea for amendment only, we heard a lot of other stuff too, and you've heard a lot from this group as we talked about that amendment as well. So if you want to add something new, add something new. I don't want to tell you not to speak, but reciting off content from some other website, probably not terribly moving for the evening, so just keep that in mind. So,
Mayor?
Yes, Rich?
Could we take a 10-minute recess?
We sure can. The council would benefit from that?
Mayor, I move to recess for 10 minutes.
Okay, don't anybody go anywhere? We just need a little breathing time. We're recessed for 10 minutes. It's okay, Rich.
before with stormwater utility funds, so that's why. Some liquid. Some liquid cannabis. No.
He's like, it's been years. I was like, I think the last time I saw you was at a council meeting before I was on council. Just attended.
What? Well. I'm gonna, full disclosure, I probably could have waited longer, but then it wouldn't have been as comfortable, and I wanted to stand up too, and. Change the feel of the room. It's a pretty good excuse.
I am, we're ready, let's go. If I can go 4 years and never bang this, I'm going to feel good about it. Okay, everybody, we are back in session. Thank you for your patience. This job is sometimes challenging, and so every once in a while we need a little breather too. I appreciate that. To remind everybody where we are back now. We are about to begin discussing a motion on the floor. Even though we just did it, I'm going to ask April to read it one more time, just so we remember where we are, and it's sort of part of the record. Please read the motion.
Motion to adopt an ordinance prohibiting adult use cannabis business establishments.
Thank you, April. As with the last time, we're going to talk a little bit here, then we'll ask for public input, and then we will circle back around and hopefully create some action tonight. I'll remind everybody, again, please, 5 minutes. Keep it to the subject. Don't feel like you're compelled to repeat things that have already been said. You're certainly welcome to, but it's not really adding to the conversation. And so with that, Council, any additional comments or questions on the motion that's on the floor? No? Okay, so you probably have a pretty good idea where everybody stands after the last hour. So we'll now take comments or questions from the audience, so please approach the podium and let us know what's on your mind.
Hello, I'm Wayne Cerny. Again, I'm from Downers Grove. There's a few things here that are going on. The reality is that marijuana is illegal at the federal level. We're going to be allowing people to start up businesses in our town for violating federal law. That's the reality. All of these people, most of them, but eventually they will be on the AML KYC list. These are going to be cash-based businesses. They can't open up bank accounts. So you have to think about the cost to society. It's not just the children, the exposure, and the acceptance of it, but it's also the cost to our village. For crime, there can be serious violent crime that could be focused on these types of businesses. That's one of the reasons why I oppose it. I've traveled around the country. I've traveled internationally where countries have approved it and then rescinded the legality of marijuana. The towns I've seen, like in Colorado, where they have these dispensaries, are not the vibrant communities. The vibrant communities, I come and I ask, why was it so beautiful, but I didn't see any dispensaries? And they're, well, we opted out in those counties. So I just want to say that think about who you're going into business with and the consequence of that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor Barnett?
Yes,
Is
sir.
it possible to, can I hop in there by any chance?
Sorry?
Can I hop in by any chance, or does it need to come back to this?
Let's let them finish, and then we'll come back.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Jim Watson, Downers Grove resident for 6 years. I came here tonight to express my thoughts and concerns to the council with respect to the proposed ordinance to prohibit adult use of cannabis business establishments. On September 3rd, this council agreed to the idea to direct staff to prepare amendments to the Plans Commissions to hold a hearing. I believe it was 6-1. Commissioner Earl, you actually voted against that or asked against that. On September 10th, the motion was brought forward by Commissioner Jose to do that, gather more information. It was voted down at that point, 1 week later, 4-3. A motion to prohibit cannabis business establishments was brought forward at that time and passed 4-3. That's what we're discussing here today. On the 17th, the council discussed the ordinance and asked for public opinion. Due to the timing of these matters and the quickly shifting of opinions, an opportunity did not present itself for me to share my thoughts until tonight. It was made clear by several members on this council that they want public opinion and the thoughts of this community. I have personally done that on Facebook, on Nextdoor, and via email to each of you, and I appreciate those who have responded. However, it became clear to me that I must present my thoughts in person in order to be heard. The business opportunities that were presented to this council go beyond dispensaries. We have the opportunity to bring cultivators, processors, and transporters to Downers Grove. Illinois has legalized the use of cannabis effective 1/1/20. That decision has been made. We as a community must accept that and understand it will be here. Our neighboring townships have opted in. We just spoke to that of Darien. This is the opportunity to be part of a growth industry. Several of you have proposed the wait-and-see approach. As you are aware, this is just the first opportunity for a city to opt in cannabis. However, the second state, and this is speaking to the licenses, is later down the road and is focused on those cities that are going to be more socially impacted by that. Downers Grove would not qualify for that. We've already opted out or voted against an amendment to look at that down the line. I feel like this is just a delay technique. I would rather vote on it today to opt in. We have to put the fears of cannabis use behind us. This is no longer about use, but about the business of cannabis. Even if it is decided not to allow dispensaries, can we have the option to allow other cannabis-based businesses, which are business-to-business models? Those are the ones I mentioned earlier, the cultivators, processors, and transporters. Those do not sell to the public. However, the council has allowed their fears of cannabis to not even allow them to discuss that option. I urge this council to take a moment and re-review the information they have. I believe more discussion you will see that this could be a positive option for Downers Grove and its future. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Rick Kay, and I'm still from Downers Grove. The question is not about what individual council members feel about the legal use of marijuana. The issue here is that the input from a large number of citizens has been ignored. This is not the Electoral College. Council members need to listen to their constituents and represent the majority opinion. Shutting down the discussion because voters disagree with you is dangerous and just plain wrong. There are many ways of communicating. Standing at this podium is one way to be heard. Email, social media, letter writing, and phone calls are equally valid. I find it disturbing that a few of you are letting personal feelings get in the way of looking out for the future of Downers Grove and its financial health. You have no problem collecting taxes on the sale of alcohol and tobacco products, which are legally protected and proven risks to those who choose to use them. People come from outside our village to consume alcohol in our establishments and purchase nicotine from our merchants. We tax the sale of these legal products to help pay for the many services provided for the support and growth of Downers Grove. Several of you have stated that nothing will change your mind on the topic, and several of you didn't even bother to respond to my email. It makes me wonder what other topics that have or will come before this body that you have made your mind up on before listening to the voters. It's an important part of critical thinking to be willing to change your mind based on new information. It's equally important to put your personal feelings aside, listen to and act on what voters and colleagues respectfully request of you.
Thank you.
Stacy Salmon, a resident of Downers Grove, and I came here and I really didn't want to have to speak, and so I don't have prepared words, but I wanted to come here and see an improvement in process, and I have been disappointed in watching ignorance and fear-based decision-making lead this whole entire discussion. And I just wanted to reflect on what Commissioner Jose offered as the pause button that was asked for by 3 of the commissioners who then went and retracted that request. So I just want the record to note that with the exception of Commissioner Earl, who has always expressed that she won't listen to the public on this particular issue. 3 of you said you would, and then retracted that statement today by denying the opportunity for further discussion, and we noticed. So, thank you.
Before we go any further, let me just inject for a minute here. I've been sitting up here for 10 years, and we've had challenging conversations before. We'll have some more challenging conversations again. Let's please try and dispense with the idea that lack of agreement is the same as lack of hearing or listening, okay? Because it's not the case. I happen to be on probably the losing side of this vote, okay? But we need to keep that in perspective. What we're asked to do, what the 7 of us are asked to do every single day that we meet on a variety of subjects, is take a bunch of input, public input, data, staff input, best practice things, a variety of input, but then make a decision. It is not purely a contest of, as I alluded to earlier, counting emails or figuring out exactly how many pieces of input we have from any one source. We have to do more than that. So just, please, let's keep that in mind. Go ahead.
Hello, Greg Chang, Illinois resident. Please opt out. Thank you.
Thank you. That was a perfect comment.
Hi, Steve Gazdecki, Downers Grove resident. I think something, maybe y'all have thought about it, but it's not just about the tax revenue to be gained by opting in, but consider if people from Downers Grove, and some of them probably will purchase marijuana somewhere, have to go to another town to buy it, they're also going to be prone to buy lunch in that other town, do some grocery shopping in that other town, spend money in those other places that they would otherwise be spending here. So this opting out is a net loss for all businesses in Downers Grove. Conversely, if we have a dispensary somewhere away from the kids, over in the industrial area or something, we will draw people from towns that have opted out. And again, we will benefit from their business at businesses that have nothing to do with recreational marijuana. Just want you all to consider the business impact both ways. Thank you.
Thank you.
So, dear Mayor Barnett, Commissioner, I'm Chen Liao, and my school district is Downers Grove North. I have 2 kids, one 10-year-old, one 2-year-old. And I read the minutes and I disagree on a few things. So, especially about there's a sentence saying no evidence show that cannabis is more dangerous than alcohol. Well, I'm not arguing which one is more dangerous. The point is we don't need another addictive drug. I'm aware that it's legal statewide, but still I want to limit the access to the kids. So I don't like to see my kids get more influence on this substance, and opt out is the safest measure I can do now to protect them. So the substance most abused by teens is alcohol. Why? Because it's legal and normalized and accessible. It's available for purchase by all siblings and friends, and accessed by stealing it from parents. So by zoning a recreational marijuana to be sold in Downers Grove, we will increase access to kids and advertisement, even though some of them say they don't aim for young kids, but they still influence the kids. So as we know, advertising, they will work for our teens. So this product sounds very cool. Do we want this addictive and dangerous product to be sold here in Downers Grove? Second point, marijuana is a gateway drug to opioids, and this terrifies me. So looking at all the data, for example, these documents, one data point is not just one data point, it's actually one life. So I don't want my kids to be one data point. Every day, more than 130 people die in the United States after overdosing on opioids. And opioid crisis today is a very serious national crisis that affects public health as well as social and economic welfare. And we don't want another addictive drug to make this crisis worse. The third point, other harm it can do is it also raises the possibility of traffic accidents. I know that somebody argue it won't affect kids, but in fact, these accidents include accidents on kids as well. So keep that in mind. To keep our kids safe and have a bright future, we need to opt out. So there can be a lot of research done, but I think my point is made now. So please opt out. Thanks.
Thank you.
My name is Andrew Peloso. I'm a Downers Grove resident since 2011. I really thought that maybe I would just go ahead and read word for word the letter that I'd sent earlier this afternoon, but that's not going to be particularly productive. Really, at this point, this meeting is largely unproductive. Mayor Barnett, I take exception with the comment that you made. I think that what you are hearing from a number of your constituents, taxpayers, residents, is extreme dissatisfaction with the process. It is dissatisfaction with how we are being represented on the council. It is the actions that certain council members have taken that seem to blatantly favor a particular position. There has been a large discussion about the need for a stop button, the need to do research. But no, we don't need to do those things now. This inconsistency is what is troubling to the vast majority of the people that are either here encouraging you to not act on this ordinance, this proposed ordinance, or the many other people that have emailed you, that have contacted you in a variety of ways. What we're seeing here and what our fear is simply reckless government. Is that this council is taking their personal positions and personal interests above the residents, above the people that voted for you. And I might add that I did vote for you. I voted in the election. So I have my own personal opinions on this. And I think that I'm entitled to my level of concern and my level of outrage about how this has gone. Commissioner Culvaney, he was talking at length about Downers Grove wanting to be a friendly community to businesses. This discussion is precisely why if I was a business, I would not locate to Downers Grove. Because my fear would be is that somebody gets into their head that now it's not marijuana. Maybe it's fatty foods. Maybe it's R-rated movies. Maybe it's whatever floats into your head at the time. Maybe I don't want to be in Downers Grove because I can't predict the environment. I worked for 18 years for the state of Indiana as a regulator, and predictability is the cornerstone. It is the foundation of good government. And what's going on with this discussion is basically a free-for-all. And what it sends as a message to businesses, and not just cannabis-based businesses, because we're well past that. We all know how this is going to go. What it's saying to other businesses is that Downers Grove is kind of a free-for-all. And if I were a business, if I were a Cooper's Hawk, I'd have to think long and hard about why would I want to locate into this community. Because a community that doesn't know how to govern, and a community that does not understand the will of the people, is a community that's not friendly for business. It's kind of mostly just a circus. And we all know what happens with circuses. They pack up and they leave. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak tonight.
Thank you. Stop. Stop with the clapping.
I need you to chill out.
Stop. Address the council. Please address the council. We're up here.
Yana
This way.
Krzyzek. Right,
Please.
Downers Grove. I'm a lifelong resident of Illinois, 25 years in Downers Grove. There's been a mass exodus, as you know, in Illinois, and it's largely in part because of what happened with the recent marijuana legislation. Why? Because it was the first out of the 11 states to do it by legislation and not give people of Illinois a vote. We do know when we see those nice little blue maps and those little red maps that Illinois is largely red except for Chicago. So I am one of those people that is going to join the mass exodus after June 12th, which I hope, I don't need to tell you what happened on June 12th. I have looked, we have purchased land somewhere else, and we will be leaving precisely because I no longer have a voice in Illinois. This has been shoved down our throats. We were not allowed to vote for this. We're the first state out of the 11 that has legalized recreational marijuana, and we were given no voice. So let let Downers Grove be that tiny voice and saying, you know what, some of us, when we have a vote, are here. And we're letting our voices be known since we were not allowed by the state of Illinois to do so.
Thank you.
Mayor Barnett, respected council members, my name is Lisa. I've worked in the Downers Grove area for 14 years and live here for the past 5 years. and we moved my family to the Downers Grove area. I'm here to request that the city of Downers Grove would opt out of legalizing the sale of recreational marijuana, and below are the points for why I feel so. When I was reviewing the City Council's website, a few statements that are listed in the About Downers Grove section say the following. Highly ranked schools were a top factor in Downers Grove being named one of the top 10 livable cities for kids by livability.com. This is on the Downers Grove website. In my 5 years of living here in Downers Grove, I've seen many families move from the city of Chicago to Downers, myself included. Moving forward, one of the factors that parents would consider when looking to purchase a home in the suburbs is that if the suburb has legalized recreational marijuana sale. This can potentially negatively impact school ratings, property values, and the current recognition that's given to Downers Grove by Forbes as one of America's friendliest towns. We've already spoken about JAMA Pediatrics and the data on how recreational marijuana can affect kids, so I would not go into that. Also, many people have spoken about how this can impair judgment of an individual, cause traffic safety, so would not talk about that. What I'd like to submit today is I have 160 individuals who have signed, and they share the same opinion as me, so don't think of this as just numbers, but people's opinions who are sharing that they would like to opt out. And these are a variety of people, small business owners who are concerned about the safety of themselves, their employees, and the negative impact this rule would bring to their businesses. They are local church members who firsthand run addiction programs. So these people see firsthand the effect of how addiction can harm an individual, their families, and potentially the society. The petition is also the signature signed by residents of Downers like me who are concerned about the well-being and safety of our families. My request to the council is to be empathetic to the environment that we are in when we make this decision. What we do not know at this point is what the long-term impact will be of legalizing sale of recreational marijuana. Today, a trip to Family Video is sufficient for a preschooler to learn their first acronym, CBD. So please consider safety before revenue, because the loss of even one life is too expensive. So at this time, I'd like to present to you the signatures that were collected.
You would hand those to the guy at the end of the table there, or? Thank you. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Sandy Ziegler, and I'm a resident of Downers Grove. I'm not a public speaker, so it's hard for me to be up here, but I would just like you to consider, even though something is legal, that doesn't mean it's right. And there are many other villages around, I hear, that where people can go to get marijuana if they want to. There was a friend of mine who I love very dearly. I went to Downers South, and he was there, and I met him many years ago later, and I thought we were having a nice time having pizza, and he said to me, "Sandy, how do you think I am right now?" And I said, "Okay," and he said, "Sandy, I'm stoned." And then he went on to say how driving affected him and how everything was magnified. And I thought to myself recently, I've read studies, and that was in the 70s when they say that THC, or whatever the property is called, was much lower than it is today. And, I think about our kids, and I think I know 3 mothers that have lost their adult children to drugs, and I just feel like marijuana can start somebody on that road. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Zach Alexander. Again, I wasn't planning on talking, but there's a lot of misinformation going around, and my understanding is emails are ignored if you're not here, from what I've heard from a commissioner, so I'd like to dispel some of the misinformation I've heard. According to the Journal of Economic Behavior and Organization, 11 counties in Seattle saw a 15 to 30% reduction in rapes and a 10 to 20% reduction in theft compared to 10 near identical counties in Oregon that did not opt in for sales, whereas Seattle did. In terms of, let's see, according to the Economic Journal, borders counties where marijuana sales were legal saw a 10% reduction in murders, a 9% reduction in assaults, and a 41% reduction in drug-related murders. As it pertains to teen drug usage, according to the Journal of American Medical Association, while 24% is the raise in all teenage marijuana usage, areas where it was legal saw an 8 to 9% reduction. I've heard people say that this is a cash-only business, whereas many apps and programs like CanPay are already in service that allow people to use debit and non-cash ways of paying. Also, as of September 18th, 2019, the House bill, the States Act, has 206 co-sponsors, and the Senate bill has 33 co-sponsors. That will effectively make it legal at a federal level and handle all of the banking and everything else with additional acts that have been added to it. And lastly, according to both the Economic Inquiry and the American Journal for Public Health, no long-term increases in traffic accidents have been shown as a result of legalization. So, thank you.
Thank you.
I'm David Fu. I'm here to speak out for recreational marijuana. I'm working in the Downers Grove on 3131 Wood Creek. My company do drug screening in the hiring processing. Our company in the location hires a lot of temp workers. So whenever there was some drug test field, including marijuana, they're going to fail to get a job. So if you have marijuana, those guys, have those usage, we're going to affect those economics. I have a real story to share with you. My colleague Fred has a police friend, and for the reason I don't want to mention this man, I just called Mike. Mike has a daughter. She dreamed to be a policewoman. She had the opportunity to apply this type of job. Unfortunately, the drug test result was positive. She was not only lost this opportunity, also her dream was broken because of this record. She said she never used the drug. What's happening? Because she went to a party, somebody gave her candy, which contains marijuana extraction, and he ate that. And in the interview that day, the test failed those tests. So that's the sad story. Just share with you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for letting me speak. My name is Diane Kasnick. I'm a Downers Grove resident for 25 years. I'm also a parent, and I'm also a nurse. And what I wanted to say about, first off, I think we should opt in. I spent 12 years in the emergency room, and never, ever once did I see a marijuana overdose. I saw alcohol overdoses, heroin overdoses, all sorts of other drugs, but never anyone ever overdosed on marijuana. And the other thing is, if anything's a gateway drug, it's certainly not pot, it's the alcohol. And that's all I really wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, Christine Martin, Downers Grove. I come to the podium tonight to petition that Downers Grove opt out from selling recreational marijuana. I come to the podium first and foremost as a mother and as an individual that cares for the well-being and safety of those in our community. Tonight, there are facts and figures from both sides of the issue, as many many stats as I have poured over in the last few weeks. I still return to my own sense of where my moral compass directs me. That being said, I think all of you on council are doing an outstanding job as you decide on how to make our students safe at Downers Grove North High School as they cross Main Street to and from the school. Your concern is for the kids and our children in this community, which is, as adults, that is our first and foremost responsibility as parents and all individuals. Your concern for the kids stemmed because our community suffered and still reels from the tragedy that occurred at that crossing this past school year. That loss was due to a driver who was on drugs. Every life is valuable, so even if one teenager dies because his or her community thought it was okay to send the message to kids that recreational marijuana is no big deal, that is not acceptable. Please follow your own lead and continue to protect our kids. Simply put, if you normalize use, commercialize as a product, and make it available, usage rates will increase. If you increase use, you increase the number of adverse effects that occur from marijuana use. These include emergency room visits, episodes of psychosis, car and fatal car accidents, rates of addiction, rates of poison control, because a lot of this looks like candy now, rates of depression, suicide, and rates of addiction to harder substances, including opioids. In closing, Downers Grove has cultivated and highly values their status as a safe and family-friendly town. Being a marijuana hub would weaken this brand, which is far more valuable than any small amount of tax revenue we would collect. So, to me again, most importantly is, I ask you not to send the message to our youth that allowing marijuana sales in Downers Grove is acceptable. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello again, Karen Crow, Downers Grove resident. Following that very profound and well-researched speech, this seems a little lighthearted, but we were in Colorado Springs 2 years ago as a family to visit the college there. And as we walked, they were having a parade downtown, and as we walked up and down the streets, everyone had a store selling marijuana. And we stopped for ice cream. Everyone's making the joke about a store being right next to Every Day's a Sunday. But we sat there in the ice cream store, and right next door with pot plants in the window was a pot store. So the other thing is the college we visited was Colorado College. Marijuana was not legal on the campus at all, even if you were of a legal, alcohol was legal to the kids who were of age, but marijuana was not, no matter what. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Maria Wagner, and I've been a resident of Downers Grove for about 20 years. My heart is with the children, and I have had an organization I have connected with called Mom Strong, and it highlights the stories of their children and how they are affected by marijuana usage. I talked to Sally Schindel, and she was a resident of Illinois. I believe she has since moved away. I said, what should I say? And she said, represent the families that have been harmed by this drug. So all I really would like to do is just give you a snapshot of her story. Her son, his name was Andy Zorn, born in 1982, a joyful life, easily making, keeping friends. It was his mission to make his family laugh and have a good time. He made parties come alive. When he grew older, he helped his friends with their mental health and substance abuse issues. But it all began to get harder for him to do so as he became a teen and thought he had to participate in drinking and drugs to fit in. He was good at hiding the extent to which he indulged in these activities and surprised everyone with his statement in his suicide note, and I quote, "My soul is already dead. Marijuana killed my soul and ruined my brain." He died at age 31 in 2014. He had spent his last 5 years in a downward spiral of marijuana abuse, calls to suicide helplines, hospitalizations in at least 5 different mental health hospitals on 3 different occasions, and 2 sentences of court-ordered mental health treatment. During the last week of his life, he told his mother, father, and social worker that he had to quit using marijuana to live,
but he was unable to do so. He was addicted. He could not quit. When he tried, he had nightmares. Awake, his life was often a nightmare. He suffered major depression for years. He never worked with a psychiatric care professional long enough to get a firm diagnosis. It varied from PTSD, OCD, bipolar, anxiety, depression, as well as severe cannabis use disorder. As his mother, I know he did not suffer any of these disorders as a very young man prior to his apparently very adult marijuana use. One of his doctors noted in his records, Andy is a kind and gentle man. He's an honorable man, a smart man with goals and skills to make them happen. Andy has a great smile and people are comfortable around him. For a time, he functioned at a rather high level, often having jobs, having earned an associate's degree, and completed 3 years of active duty in the Army's 82nd Airborne Division and a tour of duty in Iraq. But as the marijuana addiction gained control over him, he lost his insight into his own mental health, isolated and avoided his friends and family. He quit his jobs and disappointed himself over and over. Marijuana killed the soul and ruined the brain of a very fine young man, kept him from seeking appropriate mental health care, and left family and friends reeling from the loss. Before this country goes any further in legalizing marijuana for recreational use and calling it safer than alcohol, I would hope Andy could be heard. Marijuana killed my soul. So this is in honor of Andy and his mother, Sally Schindel. I feel that any amount of tax revenue just does not amount to the safety and the well-being of our children in Downers Grove. I ask for you to opt out. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Susan Wan, a resident of Downers Grove. I want to really just share my disappointment with the commissioners and how this whole process has happened. I know that Commissioner Wallace reached out to me earlier this year to serve on the ad hoc Human Services Committee, to which I did. What this process has made me realize is that you guys really are not interested in our opinion. And what I have done and spending that time prior to this meeting for that committee has been a complete waste of time. And I don't have any faith that in the go-forward recommendation that you have asked us as a committee to go forward and make other recommendations to you will be heard at all. So I'm just telling you that this process has completely dissolved my trust in you. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm sorry. And I'm rescinding my interest in participating in the continuation of that. Thank you.
Yana Kurchuk, Downers Grove. In response to that marijuana doesn't do anything, first of all, the THC in there is over 50% stronger than it used to be, back in the day. But anyway, all you have to do is Google, look up anything, and seeing adverse effects already happening under, the use of. He's at it again, okay. Anyway, let me just read you something from the Associated Press. The Denver man who claimed that eating marijuana-infused candy led him to kill his wife was sentenced to 30 years. Moments before he shot her in the head, Christine Kirk told a 911 dispatcher her husband was hallucinating and was getting a gun after eating pot candy. And you can look up anything online. Just recently, the Chicago Tribune had a mother's plea of her child that was killed by someone that was under the influence of marijuana. It causes psychosis. If you don't think it does, then you need to look up what the meaning of the word psychosis is.
Guys, hey, both of you, stop. If you guys want to stay in the meeting, you're going to, if you want to, both of you, if you want to stay in the meeting, you're going to have to stay in the meeting by the rules that I laid out earlier, okay? So keep it away from each other. Focus on us, not each other, okay? Stop. All right. Stop. Please. Go ahead. Ma'am, go ahead.
My name is Frances Preet. I'm
again here as a health professional. I am a physical therapist and I work in home health. I want you to know that part of my job is to get people off opiates. These are legal opiates that are given out when a person has like a total knee or a pain syndrome. I want you to know I've seen everything across the board where it has been very easy for people to use the opiates and have no problem. And I've also seen it where it's been very difficult to get the people off the opiates. We don't know who is going to be addicted and who is not going to be addicted to these drugs. Okay, so that's number one. Number two, we worked very hard in the health professional field to try to monitor and get people to consciously look at their intake of tobacco. We now have worked so that people do not smoke in the offices, they don't smoke in restaurants, and they only smoke in their homes. This is reasonable and this is responsible. But one of the problems is that when we know that when tobacco started, there was a big push to make it look really exciting and fun. Well, what are we doing with marijuana by saying, oh yes, this isn't so bad? We don't have enough information. What I have read, though, is that the marijuana of the 70s that I grew up in is not the same marijuana that we have now. And we do not understand everything about THC. I think it has a point to be held in as a medicinal product, and that's where I'd like to see it stay. I don't care what other people are doing, but I do want the message of our youth to know that this is a very controversial thing and has potential for harm. We just don't know who the harm is going to be to. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening once again. Paul Worster, Downers Grove resident. I just want to add to a couple things that have been said earlier. First off, I do agree with the comments about the process here. Despite Mayor Barnett attempting to keep this in check, and I understand the motivation, it is clear that a pause button is not really a pause without a deliverable date on the back end. So if you were truly interested in that, perhaps some forethought about wasting all of our time here prior to that would have been useful to those of you who declined that, except for Mrs. Earle, who clearly is opposed to it regardless. That said, I am in favor of opting in. I disagree with the opt-out amendment. If you're going to be able to drive 5 minutes over to Downers Grove to go to a shop there, Downers Grove loses all control of how we're going to administer this, how we're going to regulate it, and the likely reality is that at some point in the not too distant future, this will be federally legal. That's the way the country is moving. It seems to be an unstoppable trend at this point. The state approved it. So the issue of whether we agree with marijuana use or not, the fact of the matter is that it's going to be legal in Illinois on January 1st. And we can't change that, even if we wanted to, which I personally don't. So the issue to me is, what does this locality do with this new law? Do we decide to let it go somewhere else where we lose any control and therefore leave the black market, which currently exists pretty robustly throughout all of Illinois, including here in Downers Grove, to potentially continue to supply adults, kids, and for those who, there's been a lot of conversation about the children here, which I understand and I respect. I have children of my own. Do I want them smoking marijuana? Absolutely not. Clearly there's science that says it affects the adolescent brain in a different way than adults. But if I'm not mistaken, the state of Illinois is for 21 and years older, am I right? The reason it's easier to get cannabis for kids than alcohol is because alcohol is regulated. It's more difficult to go to a store that's operating properly, and we have controls in place. I've been a store director in a retail establishment that's had undercover police people come in with underage people trying to purchase tobacco or alcohol. There are ways of handling that. And so because of those things, because there's a legal regulatory system in place, it's more difficult for kids to get alcohol and cannabis. They have access to it now. So for those of you in here that think moving it from Downers Grove away, from Downers Grove to Westmont or Darien is going to stop the flow of black market product, which is not regulated, you don't know what's in it, especially with all the vaping issues these days, there are cartridges of oils you can get that kids can vaporize, potentially subjecting them to the other chemicals that are causing some of these lung disease, among other things. My point here is that shifting it away and saying it doesn't exist in this however mile radius Downers Grove is not going to solve that problem. It's just going to push it a little more underground and keep a black market in place, which I think most people would agree is not ideal for society. So those are my thoughts. I disagree with the opt-out. Please decline this measure, although it seems as if it's a foregone conclusion, which is disappointing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. Dear Mayor and Commissioners, my name is Arista Wang, the mother of 2 children. First, for many people, marijuana can be addictive. The main active ingredient in marijuana is THC, which can lead to addiction. 1 in 11 adults who use marijuana become addicted. And the younger you start using, the higher the risk. 1 in 6 people who start in their teens may become addicted. Second, marijuana use can negatively affect your performance in academics and athletics. In fact, research has shown, compared with those who don't smoke marijuana, students who do are more likely to drop out. Third, marijuana harms people's health. CDC announced on October 3rd that it has confirmed 1,080 vaping illness cases with 18 deaths so far. 78% of those patients vaped THC. Recognizing a public health emergency, the governor of Massachusetts ordered a 4-month ban on vaping and recreational marijuana sales, which have been legal there since 2018. The use of e-cigarettes and marijuana vaping products is exploding, and we are seeing reports of serious lung illness, particularly in our young people, said Governor Charlie Baker. So, to protect our children and the family we love, Mayor and Commissioners, I'm here to ask you, please keep their retail recreational cannabis store out of our community. Please vote opt-out. Thank you.
Hi, Mary Blanchard. My problem with the whole thing has really been around the process and what's taken place. What really should have been a fact-finding assignment for the council through the Planning Commission to consider zoning has really turned into what we see before us now. And, you know, the optics around a final decision here would have been so much better if the commission could have been allowed to do what it seems like a lot of people in the public would have liked to have seen them do, to really get to a decision that was more fact-based, more information-based. It seemed like the focus on retail sales became the central point here. And, you know, I don't even know that we would have qualified for a retail license, but what happened by bringing that emotional, inflammatory element here is that we lost all opportunity to look at some more lower profile manufacturing businesses. And so that's disappointing. You know, I was in the room when we had council members talking about hitting the pause button, and that opportunity was offered here, and that was stonewalled as well. And so, you know, I've seen some tactics along the way here that I really haven't liked. You know, we've had grandchildren's medical histories without any context brought into the public forum. We've had a person that was just appointed to the council that never stepped foot in council chambers before being appointed say that we all have to be here in person. There's some things that really haven't been appropriate. You know, we've been scolded for the way that we want to have fun. It just doesn't seem that professional. And, you know, you haven't set a strong stage for some of the really difficult, expensive decisions that are coming your way. You know, you want to get a real hot button issue, let's start talking about the taxes we're going to have to raise to get a proper police station and, you know, new village buildings. So I don't feel a proper platform has been set here that we can, you know, as Susan Wan pointed out, look at the credibility that has been damaged here. As an engaged resident that works to find ways to make Downers Grove the best way it can be for all, I have to be selective about where I spend my energy. And I now realize that an important place to put that energy is going to be into finding some excellent candidates so the next time there's a council election, we don't have people running unopposed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Peter Lakanowski, resident. I think you should allow it. Don't opt out. Yeah.
Thank you. We got it.
David Rose, because I'm still waiting to hear the distinction being made between alcohol and cannabis, I guess my proposal would be to amend the ordinance as presently written to include alcohol, cigarettes, and the other items that have been listed here as detrimental, and then see what people's response is.
Thank you.
Hello, good evening, Mayor, dear Mayor and Commissioners. My name is Susan. I'm a long-time resident of Downers Grove. Living here for over 18 years. We are a growing family in this community, and I'm very proud of our township. Downers Grove has a very good reputation and image for people. Downers Grove means safe community, good neighborhood, good property value, and good school district. But now I start to worry about our village's future because of option of legalized marijuana sales here. And if our community make marijuana so available which will send the wrong message to our young kids in our community. For them, it is okay to consume because this is legal. Our school and our family already work so hard to prevent children away from alcohol, tobacco, vaping now. So why we want to introduce another harmful substance for them and make a school, make a law enforcement their job more difficult. And, you know, study shows consumption of the marijuana cause many health issues and related accidents. I know the city will get more revenue, tax revenue but the cost of dealing with these health issues, related accidents, legal enforcement, will outweigh the tax revenue generated by marijuana. And we have to spend more resources to deal with health issues, related accidents, more later. So I believe prevention is better than correction. And I believe our intelligent community leaders like you have a good vision to look after our villages, long-term interest, and make wise decisions to resist these short-term temptations. Please opt out. Thank you.
Thank you. Please.
Hi, my name is Vicky Yang. I know some of you said a lot of the neighborhood town has already elected to opt in, so it may seem insignificant for Downers Grove to either say opt out or opt in, because people can just go to the neighborhood next door to buy marijuana. But I think it is significant and critical now to allow easy access of marijuana to anybody, including children. If we could save one life, I think it's worthwhile. So please opt out.
Thank you. Okay, it's almost 10. Sure, go ahead. Are we on repeat? I think the stickers probably tell us a lot. Go ahead.
Thank you, commissioners and the mayor. First, thank you for your service. I notice you guys are a very good listener. You listen us patiently from either side. Everybody got a chance, got enough time to express your concern or your idea. So I think we should respect the commissioners' committee's decision. And the point I want to mention is if we allowed legalization of the marijuana dispensary in Downers Grove, I think we sent our kids a wrong message. That means marijuana is something not too bad. It's privilege of the adult. So it would be very cool to try something only adult can enjoy. So actually the research indicate the percentage of the teenagers using marijuana, in the legal marijuana state has much higher than the average level nationally. So that means the more tax dollar you collect, that means more use marijuana in our neighborhood, in our community. That means our kids has more opportunity to access marijuana. It could be your next door Johnny, or could be your kid's friend, best friend, could be your son. So I think we should show our children what we value, their health, their future, our community safety, or the revenue. Please opt out. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ning Yuan. I am the mother of 2 kids. I want you to vote against the recreational marijuana sales in Downers Grove. Here are the reasons for opting out. First, according to the study, the effect of marijuana can be even more serious in young people. There is much higher risk in the people whose brains are developing than those 25 years old and under. If a young person uses this regular, there is a host problems can happen. So let them less chance to get marijuana. Although this is a free society, but we should add on our social value and set up a good example for the kids. Second, marijuana affects many of the skills that you need to drive safely. After using it, the risk of getting into a car accident going up significantly. And also, police of Woolwich City said they don't have the technology to test the amount of impairment with marijuana like they do with alcohol. Third, a study by the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development found that Colorado, Washington, and Oregon, these states with illegally marijuana were among the top 4 states with an increase of homeless people between 2017 and 2018. I wouldn't like to see the city of Downers Grove deal with these kind of things. Tax gain from selling marijuana will not be enough to reverse unpredictable financial and intangible costs that it can bring to the city. For example, medical costs, mental illness issue, homelessness, and the crime. Every $1 you make, the cost is $4.05. It's easier for a city to destroy itself than to improve itself. In conclusion, to keep the city of Downers Grove safe and good reputation, I strongly ask Mayor and the commissioners to choose the same choice as Lyle and Naperville. Option out. God bless America and bless the city of Downers Grove. Thank you for attention.
Thank you. Okay, let's bring this back to the council. Are there any other questions or comments from my colleagues on this before we take a vote on it? Kavanaugh, please.
I just wanted to say thanks to everyone that has spent the time this evening to give their thoughts. What I wanted to share, and I'll try to keep this as brief as possible, what I wanted to share is kind of something I was working on up until maybe an hour or so before we came here, because we know that we're talking about an issue that is difficult, but if you guys would indulge me for a minute, I would appreciate it. Over the past month and a half, we've heard from residents and commissioners alike who have brought their own unique perspective to the issue of recreational marijuana. Each of the council members has had their reason and their stance on this issue, which I respect, and so do I. Coming up with this decision, I've tried to do some of the following things that I hope have kind of pull out some of the issues that we've heard tonight that kind of weigh this issue one side or the other. The first thing I tried to do in this process has been to pull out, or one, acknowledge that there are fears and stigmas associated to what this issue means that are real fears for some people. And what I've tried to do personally is pull that out of any equation that I have. If there's any thoughts about it, pull that out so that I can look at the issue. The second thing, we've heard often, and I think I've even mentioned it, is this idea of image and brand. Another topic that could possibly be subjective depending on how you look at it. And so my goal was to pull that out of my own personal process and decision making as well. And the last thing on this particular thing before I get to the points is simply, I appreciate the residents that we've heard that have said both in person, online, that have pretty much said, hey, we have so much information that there's enough to go on both sides depending on where you fall on this issue. But what I wanted to do is try to take this issue and look at it in a totally different way. We've heard fear and accidents and things of that nature, and I would hope that you guys would just follow me on this for a little bit. As someone that has spent the last 20 plus years in this startup, innovation, and economic development environment, it's impossible for me to look at this issue of rolling out recreational marijuana without evaluating whether or not it makes good business sense for the village of Downers Grove. In March of this year, MedMen, the best-known cannabis retailer in the United States, began struggling to raise cash to cover its mounting losses. Their struggles were documented earlier this year in Stephen Roderick's Rolling Stone article, The Rise of Big Weed, MedMen's Growing Pains, April 16, 2019, as well as Alex Berenson's article, Cannabis Retailer MedMen's Financial Troubles, A Warning for the Marijuana Industry, March 28, 2019. These pieces kind of focus on the struggles that companies who have developed this model of the Mac store, the clean, upscale approach to selling marijuana it highlights the troubles financially that they have been facing to the point of just burning through, in a sense, tens of millions of dollars, and still that's not enough. For someone that has pioneered the industry to a degree, still cash infusions is not enough to keep this company moving in the right direction. In a September 9th, 2019 Tribune article by reporters Ali Murati, Dan Petrelli, Jamie Monks, entitled, "Many Marijuana Businesses Aren't Sure They'll Be Ready for Recreational Sales by January 1st, Here's Why," the Pritzker administration acknowledges the law is designed to allow for a gradual ramp-up and wasn't designed to replace the black market for pot. The same article acknowledges a possible siphoning of sales from one location to another due to unavoidable administrative zoning issues at the state level. The state said it's encouraging companies to keep an eye out for other competition. Chicago Sun-Times article reporter Tom Schuba, August 26, 2019, "Your weed dealer will be okay, even after marijuana becomes legal." This information provides insight that the black market marijuana, which we've kind of heard, and I'm trying to stay away from all the stats, the black market marijuana market will continue to erode what we see as the established market for this for a period of something of like 5 years is what, if we're pulling from other areas, but I'm trying to stay away from the apples to oranges, because what is good for Colorado or California may not be what it looks like here. So I'm trying desperately to stay away from that comparison. But if we looked at that, it was a 5-year period before that area got to about 80%. The legal establishments got to 80%. In the article, "As marijuana industry grows, so does its banking problems." This was a March 18, 2019 report. Illinois State Treasurer Michael, I hope I get this name right, Friedrichs, says the inability of the legal cannabis industry in Illinois to use a bank or credit union for basic services such as check writing or access to capital is a sleeping giant. As a result, we have a cash business, and this is from 2018, of $136 million in sales that is now ripe for theft, fraud, and tax evasion. Unless financial, and this is my comment on this, unless financial institutions make changes in the near future, this gray area accounting somehow, I don't see how it does not impact these potential number sales that we are counting on or trying to budget for. Will pot tourists come to Illinois? This was something I found very interesting. A town, I want to make sure I get the town right because it's in Illinois, it's at Winthrop Harbor. I appreciate their administrator's response in this article from, let's see, will pot tourists come to Illinois? Chicago Tribune, September 27, 2019. They flat out said, where we're thinking about how we can use the money to increase or make areas better, what they did I really found interesting because it was honest. They said, we are going to use any projected tax revenue first, they say, to use some of the money to offset the cost associated with the legalization, such as potential uptick in calls, emergency medical services, law enforcement from inexperienced consumers who may misjudge inappropriate dose, one official said. If the state of Illinois is giving us a percentage back to handle some of these issues, my question is, what is the real cost? And when that bill shows up, who pays for it? Lastly, half dozen agencies have proposed rules on issues such as oversight for growers, record-keeping standards for retailers, documentation of taxable income, and a complete loan program to help social equity applicants. With less than 90 days to go, none of those proposed rules, from what I understand from the article I listed here, an article I referenced earlier, have been implemented. With less than 90 days to go, none of those proposed rules have been published to the Secretary of State's site, the first of an approval process that could take 90 days to a year. There are a host of administrative rules and regulations yet written from the state and that could possibly come down from a federal level that could completely change the business landscape of what we're talking about right now. I'll conclude with this. Since these concerns first began to circle for me or pop up from a business, I've heard a lot of speculation as to my process, how I've gone about this, and how I've thought about this, and it's okay. But since these concerns have popped up a couple of weeks into us discussing this issue, I've only come to understand the topics a little bit better. I would say that we have heard you clearly, Downers Grove, whether you're in here or at home, via email, via in-person conversations, and via polls. You are heard. But what is hard for me to do is to still take the information, which is valuable and important, and then look back on the last 20 years of my business and professional life and still ask this question, is it still good business for the village of Downers Grove? And given my background, it is impossible to ignore potentially overstated revenues, future zoning issues at the state level, unforeseen and unaccounted for social cost, primary competition in the form of other dispensaries based on location, and a black market that will not go away, as well as institution and regulatory obstacles that are unforeseen. Thank you.
What else, Leslie?
Yep. First, someone who's experienced a decent amount of trauma in my life, I just have to say that it upsets me a little bit to use the death of a community member whose death was caused by someone who's not under the influence of what we're discussing in this discussion. I think that it's in our best interest to give that family time to grieve. And I can't let that one go. We'll go back to what I had prepared. But I am profoundly upset at how the governing process fell apart on this issue. We should have been discussing the implications of zoning for all cannabis businesses, not just dispensaries and retail sales. There are businesses that could fill empty industrial spaces or new industrial spaces in the areas of growing, processing, and transportation that were never discussed. We instead fell into morality arguments about legalization and consumption of cannabis, when we were arguing whether or not mental illness and addiction is correlation or causation, and it is the former. We should have been arguing about whether to be 1,000 or 1,300 feet from protected spaces, and what that means for an ideal business location for each of the available business types. While we have heard specious arguments that asserted links between cannabis use and crime, we should have been discussing things like the potential for cash-free options or new additional security options as conditions for a special use permit. When we started this process on September 3rd, I had hope for a more advanced dialogue with a clear understanding of the potential business options and our role as commissioners to properly fulfill our duty to the community by analyzing quality resources and assessing community values based on input. Instead, I saw morality judgments, very questionable resources, and a basic lack of dedication to understanding the issue at hand. We fell far short of my expectations on this governing body, for this governing body. I sincerely hope and I truly believe that we can do better in the future. We will only do so with the continued engagements of the residents, both those who agree and disagree with me, to hold us accountable. So I thank everyone, and I mean everyone, who provided feedback throughout this process. I ask that you all stay involved with how the council conducts business in the future for things that will likely have an even greater impact on both the fabric and the wallets of our community. And some of those things have been mentioned, and this includes, but is not limited to, new village facilities, human services, stormwater, and property taxes. I plan to vote no tonight, and I thank everyone for providing their feedback.
Thank you. Greg?
Thank you, Mayor. I look forward to the future consideration of whatever new business item might come from one of my colleagues who's interested in a rather extended pause button. Over the last month, we've had a pretty robust community conversation about recreational cannabis and whether to allow its sale within Downers Grove. Several things have gotten lost in that conversation, including the possibility of manufacturing or transportation businesses locating within our village, rather than just retail establishments. Unfortunately, this ordinance bans those businesses too. Also seemingly lost is the fact that legalization is upon us, whether we like it or not. Many of the negative effects cited by those who prefer to opt out are unavoidable, whether we opt in or opt out. But most of all, what's gotten lost is reason, truth, and trust. We as a council are stronger and more effective for our community when we are united, not necessarily in a desired outcome, but in a commitment to good process, regardless of outcome. Trust is often hard-earned. When good process is cast aside, and misinformation spread by majority faction, that hard-earned trust can be lost. Regardless of the outcome on this vote, all of us here should resolve tonight to reaffirm our commitment to good process, to working cooperatively from a common set of facts, and working openly and honestly with each other for the benefit of the entire village. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Greg. Anyone else want to weigh in? Rich?
Nicole? Okay. So anyway, I do appreciate everyone's input. It's late, and you've invested time. I read every single email. I engaged in Facebook, even though, you know, a reasonably small percentage of people actually see that. Most people may not realize that when something is posted on Facebook, 7% of the people who are signed up for that particular site actually see that. So it is a useful tool, but it's hard to say that everyone in Downers Grove. You know, part of this is we're going to disappoint people no matter what we do. There are those that want us to opt in who would expect us only to listen to their input and not necessarily the input of other people. The other thing is that we did talk a lot about process, and we had our first meeting on August 20th. We had another second meeting on September 3rd, a meeting on September 10th, a meeting on September 17th, and then we had other opportunities for residents to approach us on September 21st, Coffee with the Council. September 23rd, one of the ladies who spoke today for opt-in was actually came to the long-range planning meeting. There were public comments, so other people could have joined her in doing that. We discussed it on October 1st at length, and now we've discussed it on October 8th. There was some feeling that the Plan Commission had some powers and opportunities that they don't have. What would have happened here is one of these dates would have been taken up by a Plan Commission meeting, and then they would come back with their recommendations. Also keep in mind, it is a zoning and land use board. They would have discussed the 1,000 feet distance, the 1,300 feet distance. It is the responsibility of the village council to weigh in on policy matters. It's not the responsibility of the Plan Commission to do that. The other thing is that, you know, it's hard for people to come up and speak at the podium. When you speak at a Plan Commission public hearing, you have to be sworn in. Your sworn testimony, and that's part of the legal process. And so people are even more intimidated by that. So it wasn't the full-blown research that people might have expected. I mean, I've taken an attitude of, the phrase sounds kind of trite, wait and see, but I am a real big believer in business, in government, in non-for-profits to actually witness what other people have done, because you get to sit across the table from them and you get to ask them the questions, well, what would you have done differently? What really worked for you? What didn't work for you? And I've used that process before. I used it with historic preservation. I used it in a study that we conducted about downtown design review. Actually went to those various 5 different communities and sat across from the Stan Popovich's of those communities and said, what are you doing now? What are you doing compared to what your website says? What would you have done differently if you had to start over again? And it's amazing how much you can learn from that. I would love to get additional tax revenue. It's not a crisis issue, but it's a serious issue here of what we do with taxes. But I'd like us to do it right. It may take us a little bit longer than the people who opt in, who would like to have us do this immediately. And I guess my feeling is it becomes normalized, and it will become more like alcohol, which, definitely has its problems. I mean, alcohol abuse, drunk driving, the deaths that come from that are very serious issues. Vaping now, we didn't get a chance to vote on that, but vaping is now causing a very serious problem, and it would kind of make me wonder if we had the opportunity to look at that, what would we have done differently, or would have society done differently about that if they only knew? So I know that that position disappoints you. It's not that I'm not listening. It's hard to go back to people, and particularly in social media, and say, yeah, I'm listening, I just don't happen to agree with your particular approach. I think the approach makes sense to be able to see what actually happens, adjust accordingly. And I don't know, maybe someday, maybe 5 years down the road, we'll have them on Main Street, right next to Pierce Tavern. And if it's that normalized, and the problems are so limited as the people who are for this particular product say, you know, that's not outside of the realm of possibility. So once again, I appreciate your input, and I'm really not changing my vote tonight.
Cool.
Sure. I will try and keep my comments as brief as possible. At the very beginning, we talked about this being an emotional issue for those of us up here and for residents, and I think that statement was absolutely correct. Throughout this meeting that's been going on for almost 3.5 hours, I had something prepared, and I've scratched out, made notes, circled again because I wanted to come back and say those things. And so bear with me as I'm going to try and piece together my now very mangled notes. For weeks, we've continued to gather public feedback on whether to opt in or opt out. There's been a lot of discussion about process, and I do want to say that I'm disappointed that so many people take issue with the process, and I understand why. I will say that yes, from 1 week to the next, I changed my mind from a first reading to a final vote. In my opinion, that is allowed. I don't think that there's anything that says that we're not allowed to change our thoughts. That didn't come from a quick decision. That came from after that meeting with the first reading on options going to Plan Commission, me rewatching the meetings, reading more, rereading research that was provided to us by village staff. At that point in time, we started to hear a lot more public comments on social media, email, in person. And so that didn't come from a random place. I want to share that a very good friend of mine who I've known for 20 years and I trust was the lead veteran on the Legalize Illinois campaign. And he helped craft the veteran provisions for that bill, and then was also part of a group that went out to speak to municipalities about the benefits of having cannabis retail sale in town. So as you can imagine, before this was even brought to council, I heard a lot about this issue from his perspective, and the benefits for municipalities to move forward. And I'm sharing this because I want to get across that my decision tonight is not based on influence from a particular person or a particular group. I clearly have friends on both sides of the issue. My decision is based on what was presented to us by village staff, rewatching meetings, to listen to feedback from my colleagues and from our chief of police. I also want to reiterate that I'm not against cannabis for the use of cannabis for medicinal use or recreational use, should residents choose to partake. I am in favor of seeing how legalization itself impacts our community before moving ahead. There was mention about stonewalling tonight, and I think the sunset clause that was presented, again, it took me by complete surprise, and I think many other people in the room. And I voted against that because as I stated earlier, I don't feel comfortable putting an exact date on the books to talk about this when we have so many other issues that have been mentioned by several commissioners up here tonight. Again, I'm not against the issue being brought up again, but I am against an exact date being put into place to do so, given all that we have going on up here. Amongst the many things that I try and instill in my two girls, two of them are at the forefront. If something is going to come out of your mouth that isn't kind, keep it to yourself and treat other people how you want to be treated. So you will never see me speaking negatively about my colleagues on the dais, on social media, through email, or otherwise regarding their opinions on an issue. While my thoughts differ from a lot of my colleagues up here, I want to thank them for providing me things to think about and consider, and I promise you that I have been back and forth a million times on this issue, considering one side and then considering another side. It has not been an easy decision for me. There's always the opportunity to learn from other people, and I certainly do that in every instance, even when we may disagree. I'm open to communicate at any point in time about a vote I make or the way I feel about an issue. And I apologize, there were a couple people here tonight that said they didn't get a response from me. I have been trying to be very diligent about replying to every single email that I've received, and if I have not replied to yours, I do apologize for that. But I do want to take the time to say thank you to those who took the time to contact us in whatever way you felt most comfortable. There are 50,000 people in this community. I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that we would all hear a variety of opinions given that amount of people. And I think we all did our best to make the decision that we felt was right. Your feedback is vital and is always appreciated, even if we don't happen to agree on an issue. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Marge?
I've been dealing with marijuana issues in the planning and zoning realm for probably a good 10 or so years. Tangentially, in other countries I've seen it. I've seen it in Los Angeles, where we were I was at a planning conference, and this was the medical marijuana had become newly legalized, and it was very widely talked about at many of the conference events. All of the struggles that they were having with marijuana. When this became legalized medically, the village was in front of that and had already put zoning in place anticipating that it was coming. In this case, it's come a whole lot quicker, and as a result, without much thought on the state's level for all of the regulations and the costs that are going to be coming along with it. I don't think that at this time I would be comfortable in going ahead and saying this is something that Downers Grove should do, because at this time I see that the downside outweighs the upside. When you can say that that's the case, in my opinion, I don't see that there was another option but to opt out and wait for more information to come, and it will come, because some of our neighbors have gone ahead and said yes, and so we will get information. I don't know how long that'll take. I don't know how good that information will be, so I can't judge yet, and I can't say how long it'll be till that happens. Bear in mind, though, when you're saying we have to have something here, when you decide you're going to go to Target, you're not going to Downers Grove to shop. So just because something's nearby doesn't mean it's actually in your town. It's still going to be here. I'm very well aware of that. But just because we've decided not to do it doesn't mean you're not going to be able to have your fun. By all means, if that's what you choose to do, have your fun. I thank you for paying attention, especially during the back. So that's all I have, Mayor.
Thank you. From my vantage point, I do think we failed from a process standpoint. And it's not because of the outcome, but it's because we told you one thing and then we did it different. I don't know what else to say. The process, as Rich refers to, on August 28th and again on September 3rd, set clear a process that this body, 6.5 to 1 or 6 to 1, was going to go through, and then we just decided not to. And that is a real problem. It has a real threat to the public's trust and confidence in this group. It has nothing to do with the outcome. But every single conversation that I've been party to since that time including, frankly, all the opt-out conversations this evening that we've heard from, has been focused on one of about 6, I don't remember exactly the number, 6 potential activities associated with the state's legalization of marijuana. Then we never talked about the others. Our team of council folks talk periodically to both staff and each other, and in advance of August 28th, and in preparation for September 3rd, we put together a package of consideration. To Marge's point, it was in fact trying to be ahead. It was to have something in zoning, or at least going through the process of Plan Commission review, so that we weren't caught off guard. That didn't come just from staff. It came from everybody here talking periodically to each other and to staff. Something changed. I don't know what, and I only sort of care. My biggest issue is that we told the public we were going to engage in one process and then we bailed. And that's a problem. It has nothing to do with cannabis. The cannabis stuff, everything we've heard about it has been all about the use of cannabis, and look, I'm not going to use cannabis because I think it's really a bad idea to smoke things that have a potential for addiction. Surprise. But the state legalized it, and we decided we were going to have some zoning and taxation questions that we were going to vet through. And then we walked. So when the public is upset, which some are and some aren't, I hope that what we're realizing up here is that most of the public that's upset is probably not so much upset with opt-in or opt-out, but upset with they were told we were going to engage in one process and then we decided on another one. That's a problem. And I hope that we do it differently. But it is up to us to do it differently. I mean, there was nothing, remember too, there was absolutely nothing that prevented any one of the 7 of us or all 7 of us from getting to the end of that process and still making the exact same decision we made tonight. But what would have been different was those other activities would have been commented on by people who know. By people who know. With no offense to anybody up here, but nobody up here has spent 20 years entrepreneuring marijuana businesses. Everybody's well aware of the negative aspects of the use and abuse and addictive elements of marijuana. We've been through all that, we understand that. But all these other activities never got a fair hearing, and the public didn't get to participate in that fair hearing. And so this is probably not fair, so I'll just do it for me, not for my colleague. But I apologize. It should have been different than that. The process should have been different than that. So I hope that the next set of decisions we make, they've been alluded to both from the dais and from the public. We've got a bunch of big ones in front of us. I hope we can continue to do what we say we're going to do from a process standpoint. That doesn't predispose an outcome. It doesn't have anything to do with us agreeing with each other or with you guys. But it means we have to keep that process that people can have faith in. If you guys can only have faith in us when you're sitting here watching us, that's really bad. You have to be able to ignore us for 6 months and feel good about what's probably going on in your absence. That's where I think we failed. So with that, April, please call the roll.
Commissioner Earl?
Aye.
Commissioner Wallace?
Aye.
Commissioner Gray?
Aye.
Commissioner Culvaney?
Aye.
Commissioner Sadowski-Fugit?
Nay.
Commissioner Jose?
Nay.
Mayor Barnett?
Nay. The motion passes 4-3. It is, if we on each side of the other side of the room go boo, right? I mean, come on. It is too late for us to continue. We had another meeting agenda item tonight, and I would suggest that we are tired enough to not do it well. And so we're going to kind of skip here, guys. Dave, you can go ahead.
No first reading, no manager's report tonight, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. What we were going to talk about a little bit was long-range plan. We're going to punt that to either next week or the first week in November. Are there any council members who would like to report out on anything or add to the conversation tonight?
No report.
Everybody out of gas?
You know what, I just wanted to quickly...
Hey, whoa, hold on, guys. Time out.
This is...
Guys, the meeting is actually not over, all right? So, well, really, it's important. Every subject we take up is important, and I know you're here for certain ones, but if you're going to make the way out, please make the way out quietly and have the conversations outside. We have additional folks up here who would like to speak. So, Kavanaugh, please, go ahead.
This will take 30 seconds. I just want to piggyback on Fire Prevention Week. As someone that grew up in a firehouse, my dad spent his life serving the city. I grew up on Fire Truck 24 in Beverly. I absolutely love what our firemen do, what our policemen do, what all of our first responders do. And so please, 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 if you are around, if you are in the village and can participate at Night at the Firehouse or the 25th Annual Silent Parade, please come out. Thank you.
Thank you, Kavanaugh. With that, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second? Thank you. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned. Good night.